Christocentric philosophy. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Hello,
Hey,
my
can you
name
hear
is
me?
Daniel. Yeah, I can hear it.
Cool.
Yeah, my name is Daniel, and I run the YouTube channel Christocentric Philosophy, and I talk about basically topics relating to philosophy and apologetics and theology. And I'm happy to be here.
Cool. So I sent you the link to the YouTube thing. If you want to send it to people, put it in the Facebook Messenger. And so I invited you on to talk about presuppositionalism. So could you tell me your position on presuppositionalism?
All right. Well, basically, I am a Vantilian presuppositionalist, if to use a broad label. And so basically, I believe that the Reformed doctrines and Reformed Christianity provide the necessary foundation for all rational thought. And I take a transcendental approach to arguing for Christianity.
Cool. So what is the argument?
The argument can be stated in many different ways, but to put it simply, it is that uh, Christianity cannot be rationally denied because it is the foundation for rationality itself, or the concept of proof, or logical knowledge, or whatever. And so Christianity must be true because if it were false, we couldn't know anything.
So why do you think that? Because it doesn't seem to make sense to me that we couldn't know anything if Christianity was false. It seems like it's possible to know anything under pretty much any worldview.
Um, okay, I would say that the possibility that you alluded to doesn't strike me as a possibility at all. Like the possibility that knowledge is possible apart from Christianity is something that I think needs to be established. But that is not to say that the presuppositionalist does not have his own burden of justification to show that Christianity is necessary for knowledge.
Sure. So I don't understand. From my perspective, knowledge is a justified true belief. And so the only thing that's required to attain knowledge is to have a justification, a belief, and have that correspond to reality. And so it seems like those things are possible in pretty much any worldview. I don't see why they wouldn't be possible in a non God based worldview.
Well, I don't see. Okay, the my position basically is I'm not seeing why. Okay, let me put it this way: the way I see it, you and I are uh, we hold to differing or opposing epistemic positions here. You believe it is possible to know things apart from Christian revelation,
Yep.
but but I don't believe that. I believe that Christianity is necessary, and so I think this discussion is going to boil down to who can show that their position is rationally justified. And I think um, my stance on the matter can be rationally justified both internally and externally. Internally from basically the Christian revelation itself, and externally through different auxiliary arguments.
Well, so again, the first question is you claim that knowledge is only possible under the Christian worldview. And so, by my definition of knowledge, knowledge is a justified true belief. And to have a justified true belief, all you need is a brain, essentially, that can form ideas. And then once you can have ideas, you can have beliefs. And once you have beliefs, if they can have justifications, then all you need is those two things, and it has to correspond to reality. And then you have knowledge. And so, if those three things are possible, which they can be possible under any worldview, which brains and ideas are possible, then it seems like it's possible to have knowledge under multitude of potential worldviews. And so I don't understand why you think that it is not possible to have knowledge without God. I don't understand the entailment of why you think that you can't have a justified true belief in a different worldview. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, okay. Well, I think the reason we can we can provide various arguments for why knowledge is not possible in any worldview apart from Christianity. But if we were to go into all of them, it would take a bit of time. So I think it would be best if we narrow it down a bit. And I think I love to talk about things like scientific knowledge, for example. I assume that you're really familiar with things like science, and I believe that you really love um, scientific inquiry and things like that,
Sure.
since you talk about it on your channel.
Yep.
But
For
so
sure.
perhaps we could narrow our focus to the domain of science. It seems to me that in order for scientific knowledge or scientific inquiry to be possible, there must be order in the universe, or regularity, or predictability, as I'm sure you would agree. But the problem, as I see it, is that in a non-Christian worldview or an atheistic worldview, there is nothing that can provide that order within the universe. And as such, basically, there's nothing that makes scientific knowledge possible in such a view.
So just to understand, you said that in order to have knowledge, you have to have order. Well, I wouldn't agree with that. Like scientific knowledge, if you're like referencing knowledge to the external world, I don't think you need order, but sure, we can just grant, sure, there's order. And if there's order, why do you think you need a God to have order? Because order can just be like any law provides order. So the law of gravity provides order. So I'm not seeing why you couldn't have that under a non-God worldview.
All right, so I'm glad you brought up the topic of gravity. So basically, we would like to think that there are laws of nature or laws of physics that provide a certain type of predictability or regularity to the events of the universe. But what I would say is that such things like laws of physics or laws of nature, require um, two things. They require necessity and also contingency. Here's what I mean. For if we take a law of physics, for example, like the law of gravity, it that a law like that entails that there are certain necessary things. So for example, if I drop a ball from a height above the ground, it must fall down to the ground at a certain acceleration or whatever. So that is a kind of necessity. It is necessary that the ball falls down.
Wait, why
It's
is it necessary? Because like I can say the world is probabilistic. Say it only happens uh, 1 out of every 100 trillion times that the ball falls up. So let's say it's just a probabilistic number instead of a necessary number. We can still do science just fine. We can still have scientific knowledge. So we don't need it to be necessary.
I don't think that's true, because if we grant that it is possible that the ball falls up, then I don't see how we can make any reasonable inferences from our experience.
We could say that it most likely the case the ball will fall down. So like let's say we do science today and every 1 millionth time we drop the ball, it goes up. We can say 99.999% of the time the ball falls down, and that would be a scientific law, just like any other. You don't need to say it doesn't need to happen with 100% certainty to do science. We can do science with probabilities. I mean, we literally do. It's quantum mechanics. We literally do science with probabilities. We don't need necessary things.
Well, you say that, but if we were to make um, predictions or inferences or whatever, we need. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of mathematical or logical certainty or necessity here. but it's a kind of physical necessity. That is the sense in which I'm saying these things are necessary. Because when I kick a ball, for example, it has to move a certain way. If I were to grant that there is a possibility that the ball turns into a carrot, for example, then there is no way for me to make sense of my experience. What
Well, that's the part I'm not quite understanding, because in physics, we have no problem with saying if you kick a ball, there's some percent chance that your foot will pass through the ball. There's some percent chance the ball will go backwards. It'll go through your foot. We're fine with that. Like, we can do science just fine without knowing which direction the ball will go with 100% certainty. We can just say with 99.999%, it'll go in the direction you kick it. So from our perspective, we don't need necessary conclusions for science. That's not a requirement for knowledge in our worldview.
Right. I'm not talking about epistemic certainty. I'm saying that if you proceed upon the expectation that when you kick a ball, your leg's not going to pass through it, right? Even though you grant that there's a possibility, you still proceed upon the expectation that the laws of physics will operate as they have in the past, right?
No, like, we can just say that there's a percent chance they will, there's a percent chance they won't, and we can be fine with that. Like, why would that stop
And so,
knowledge?
right, so knowledge has to be justified, right? If there is nothing that swings the um, scale in a certain way, then you don't really know that when you drop a ball, that is going to fall to the ground.
Right. I would agree, but I don't need to be 100% certainty. So let's say I have a 51% chance certainty. That's justification. So if I have 51% chance that the ball will follow the laws of physics and a 49% chance it won't, then I'm justified in believing it will most likely follow the laws of physics. So I don't need to be 100%. I don't need it to be necessary. I can just be like, there's a percent chance it will, a percent chance it won't, and I'm justified in believing both.
Hello?
Yep. Can you hear me? Testing. Oh, I think you might have lost connection there for a little bit.
Are you there?
Hey, can you hear me now? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't think you can hear me. I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. I think it's on your end. Am I breaking up for you guys in the chat? Thank you, Clyde. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Squid. Appreciate it. No video feed. Okay, there you go. Hey, you back? Can you hear me now? Testing, testing.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear what I said before, that in our worldview, we don't need certainty? We can say if there's a 51% chance of it obeying the laws of physics and a 49% chance of it not obeying the laws of physics, then I have a justification, even if it's only 1%, to believe it'll obey the laws of physics. So I can have knowledge even though I don't have certainty.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. My point is not about I don't really have anything to do with certainty. What I'm talking about is more metaphysical in nature, about the operation of reality.
Yep.
So I'm saying that
Go ahead. Hey.
sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, right. So what I'm saying is that for you to even have that 1% justification, reality has to be a certain way. Like there has to be regularity. Even if we do not know for certain that there is regularity, there has to be regularity or order in the universe in order for science to be possible.
Well,
In order for us to be able to.
so I would agree that
Sorry, go
reality has
ahead.
to be reality. That's true.
Right. So the thing is, um, if we take something like the laws of nature, and what can guarantee that regularity or orderly nature in reality has to be something like laws of nature that say that, for example, if something is dropped from a height, it falls down. Now, this is different from our perception of these laws. That's a whole different matter about what justification we have to believe these laws. But what I'm saying is that these laws have to be in place for our scientific endeavors to be possible. And my point is that these laws cannot be sustained in a metaphysical picture that does not have God, because without God, there is nothing to um, provide the necessity required for these laws to be what they are.
Yeah, so I'm not just not understanding that at all. It seems like reality is reality, and you don't need anything to make it be reality. It just is. So if we want to say there's a consistency in reality in that it is itself, we don't need a God for that. It just is itself. Just like what is making God be himself? Well, nothing. He just is himself. Nothing needs to make an object be itself. It just is itself. Oh, it always will be. It's just a property of the thing necessarily. And so if you don't need another being to instantiate reality being reality.
The problem, though, is that the things we're talking about here are contingent. They are the things we experience, the objects of our experience are contingent. They could have been otherwise. They could have been different.
Sure.
Even the laws of nature that we're talking about could have been different.
Sure.
And if that is the case, then there has to be something that accounts for the fact that they are how they are. Now, I want to make it clear that if we restrict ourselves to the laws of nature, there is a sense in which they are necessary, and there is another sense in which they are contingent. They are contingent because they could have been otherwise. It could have been that the law of gravity, for example, is an inverse cube law instead of an inverse square law. That in that sense it is contingent, but it is also necessary in that in the world we live in right now, in the reality we inhabit, there is nothing that can contradict those laws. Whatever exists in this temporal world exists according to the laws of physics. So in that sense, they are necessary. And so it seems to me that how can we account for both the necessity and contingency of these laws?
Well, so I'm not seeing why there needs to be like, so let's say that everything is contingent and the laws of physics could be otherwise. Well, it's still the case that reality is reality, even if the laws of physics are contingent. So I don't need anything to make reality not be reality. I don't need a necessary being there. I'm still doing just fine without a necessary being. Just say reality is reality, and I can derive the laws of physics from that fact.
How can you derive laws of physics from the identity statement that reality is reality?
Because it couldn't be otherwise. It's not reality couldn't not be reality.
Yeah, but that isn't saying much though. Like what I'm saying, I'm not talking
Oh,
about
so to be
reality. I'm
clear,
talking about
reality is reality, and it doesn't need a god to be reality. So it's just even if there's no god, reality is still reality. And so I have that unchanging thing that you're talking about, which is reality. And so because reality is reality, that's where I can get the 1% justification for whatever laws of physics I want, is because if reality is reality, and there is a percent chance that in reality balls will go up or down or whatever, then I now have my justification for believing the ball will move when I kick it, because reality is reality. I don't need any necessary being there.
But that's just arbitrary the way I see it. Just saying that reality is reality doesn't really do any explanatory work. It doesn't tell us what the nature of reality is or what has to be the case for it to be the way it is. So it doesn't saying that reality is reality doesn't say much. I could just as well say that God is God, and that settles it. But
Well, it doesn't need
you
to
need
say
some kind
anything, like, because the only point here is to say, how do I get belief that an object happens with some percent chance? Well, it's because it happens in reality, and reality is reality. So that's all I need to be able to justify a belief that something's going to happen at some percent chance. All I need is some kind of existence, and then once it has that existence, I can say it'll operate within existence in some way. So I don't need any more than that. And so obviously you could say God is God. I'm fine with that too. But the point here is that you don't need a God to be able to make that claim. That's the only thing that's important.
But anything, literally anything, can be justified in that way. You can say, why does God exist? Well, because God exists in reality, and reality is reality. That it doesn't seem to me to do any kind of explanatory work.
Well, it doesn't need to. Again, the
And
point here isn't to show that it can do explanatory work. The point here is, can I have a justification without God? And the answer is yes. If I exist, then I have an
you
existence.
haven't shown that.
I'm pretty sure I did. So if I believe that reality is reality, or if reality is reality, then I have a justification for whatever happens based on my experience within reality. So I don't need, I'm not sure.
How? All right. How does the fact that reality is reality, whatever that means, how does that justify your belief that when you kick a ball, it's going to move forward?
Well, no. So what you asked when I said what justifies my belief that the ball will fall is my experience. So I just experience it and get a number.
Right.
And what you claimed was that I needed some kind of necessary foundation to justify that or something, and I don't. There's no reason to think that, but I can just say
No,
reality.
that was my claim. That was my claim.
Okay.
My claim, like I said, I was talking about the nature of reality,
Yeah.
which is metaphysics. I was saying that in order for you to even experience an orderly or regular reality, there has there has to be laws of nature, for example. And in order for those laws of nature to be in the way that we experience them to be, they have to possess two seemingly contradictory attributes, which is contingency and necessity. And
Well,
the
I don't see
point is that
the contradiction here. So laws of physics are contingent; they could be otherwise. So I grant that, but they are a certain way. They're not necessarily a certain way; they just are a certain way. So I can say, because laws of physics are a certain way, there is a percent chance things will happen, and so I'm justified in believing them. And there's no mention of a necessary thing there. It just, they have a nature. It's not necessary. It's contingent. They are contingent objects, but they have a nature to them which isn't otherwise.
all right. So if you're going to say that laws of nature are contingent and they do not possess necessity, then you really cannot account for our experience because what we experience is um, the regularity and the order and everything.
Yeah.
But without a necessity to the laws of nature, there would be nothing but chaos.
Wait, I don't see any
There would be
justification
no
for that.
order. Well, I think if one reflects on it, it seems pretty obvious because if chaos, for example, I know that's a kind of metaphorical
Yeah.
term, but to put it more precisely, it's it springs from unlimited possibilities.
What?
So if let me give an example. The ball example. If I were to kick a ball, so that's an event. Me kicking the ball is an event, it's an action, it's a fact that happens in time. So what follows from that? Um, there are various possibilities. When I kick the ball, it could act normally and go forward, or it could perhaps, let's say, turn into a fish, or spiral around and go to the moon. Like there are various possibilities. But what guarantees that a certain um, possibility is actualized is the laws of nature. But if those laws of nature are contingent, then they are unable to guarantee anything. And that would what would follow would be that literally anything is possible.
Well, yeah, I
And
don't
so
understand that.
there,
So I think there can be a contingent object that just doesn't ever change. Like there's no problem with that. So there can be a contingent law of physics like gravity, and it never changes. It's perfectly the same all the time, no matter what. Like, what's the problem with that?
that's not the point. I'm not saying that laws of nature have to change, but I'm saying that the fact that they can change, the fact that there is a possibility that they change, implies that they cannot provide any kind of necessity to the events in the universe.
Right, but I'm not understanding here. So the laws of physics already exist, and it's possible they could have changed prior to their existence, but they can't change now. And so the laws of physics are always going to be the same, no problem. Even if they change, it wouldn't matter. Like if they change, we can still do science, so it's irrelevant. But they could change, and it doesn't make a difference. We can still have knowledge, and they could, and it's possible that they can't change after they've been created or originated or whatever. So I'm not seeing how any of those arguments follow from the original argument. We can still have knowledge whether or not the laws of physics change. We can still have knowledge whether or not they could have changed from their beginning, and they may not be able to change and still be contingent.
I don't think you're grasping the core concept here. I agree that the laws of nature are contingent, and I agree that it does not follow from this that they are constantly changing. But my point is that if the laws of nature are purely contingent and without any kind of necessity to them, then there cannot be order or regularity or uniformity in the universe as required for science.
So regularity is just the something happening in time t equals 10 at the same it happened at time t equals 2. And can you have that without necessity? Yes. So like if there's a contingent law that pops into existence for no reason or something, and it just stays the same at all times, then it's consistent. It's perfectly consistent when there's nothing necessary about it. It's perfectly contingent, but still no perfect consistency. So I'm not seeing why you would need a necessary being for consistency. It can just exist and not ever change and be consistent.
I'm sorry, could you repeat what you said?
Yeah. So I'm not seeing why you can't have a contingent thing and consistency. So like necessary, like you have a contingent law of physics popped into existence for no reason whatsoever, just completely arbitrary. But then it's consistent after that. Like it never changes after that. So we have a contingent thing that's perfectly contingent, but also perfectly consistent. So we can base science and physics off of it, no problem, because it doesn't change.
All right. So I think the there seems to be a confusion here. I I've provided many examples, but what I'm trying to say is that the laws of nature here are supposed to do a certain work in reality, which is to guarantee that the things are uniform or whatever.
Well, no, that's not what they're doing
But
at all. They don't. That's not something they're supposed to do at all. Like again,
so
physics doesn't care if they change. It's fine. Physics is fine if they change. So laws don't do that at all. Laws just describe regularities. That's it, and they can change, and we don't care.
right, yeah. The point is that there are, or there has to be regularity in the universe
Yep.
in order for science to be possible.
Yep.
Do we agree on that?
Yes. Well, sort of.
Right. So the question then is what can provide this regularity? What
Well, anything that doesn't
what
change would provide a regularity, right?
anything that doesn't change,
Yeah.
and that is able to, in a kind of metaphorical sense, govern what does and does not, what can and cannot happen in the universe.
Right. That seems like irrelevant. Like I don't need any of that. Like if there's a pineapple in the universe and it doesn't change, that's a regularity. I don't need anything else.
All right, let me ask you this: um, is it possible for pigs to fly?
Sure.
It's possible for pigs to fly.
Yeah.
All right, and so if that is a possibility that can be admitted, then I don't see how one can claim to hold to a rational worldview, because atheists are the same ones that try to fault the Christians for believing in things like talking animals and whatever.
Right. I don't believe they do
So if
fly. It's just logically possible. Like there's no logical contradiction with a pig flying. It just doesn't happen.
I'm not asking about logical possibility.
What?
Is it physically possible for pigs to fly?
Nomenologically, no. Nomenologically
All
means
right.
given like the current laws of physics.
All right. And what guarantees that it is impossible for a pig to fly? The laws of physics, right?
Guarantees that. What do you mean guarantees that? Like if
What makes it such that a pig? What makes it such that it is impossible for a pig to fly?
if the laws of physics are true and pigs have a mass greater than they can lift with their appendages, then it is they can't fly. So it's just a descriptive fact that if the laws of physics are being obeyed and the laws of physics require that some amount of mass must be displaced by some kind of wings or something, and pigs don't have the ability to do that, then they can't fly.
Right. And so basically, what we have agreed on is that the laws of physics, or the laws of nature, or whatever you want to call them, they explain the impossibility of some fact. In this case, it is pigs flying. And so my point is that we need, in order for there to be the regularity needed for science, we need something that can do this explanatory work.
Wait, I'm lost.
That
I'm
is
lost here.
able
So I'm not seeing we need any explanatory anything here. The laws of physics are a certain way. Pigs are a certain way in the laws of physics, and therefore they can't fly. So it's not, I don't need anything to explain anything. It's just if the laws of physics are true.
the laws of physics. The laws of physics explain why it is impossible for pigs to fly. We just covered that.
Well, they don't explain anything. They are the thing. So the laws of physics are a thing. And because the laws of physics are a thing, that operate in the universe in a particular way, that means that pigs cannot fly. So the laws of physics don't
We're,
explain anything. They are the reason.
yeah, but a reason is an explanation. You're just using different words.
Well, no, the explanation is just a description of the physical fact. So the physical fact is the reason. It's not just because we said so.
I'm not seeing any difference here. We're basically referring to the same concept. The laws of physics are the reason why pigs cannot fly.
Right.
Right. And so right. If that is the case, then the laws of physics are are kind of, to put it metaphorically, governing the universe,
Sure.
because they in a sense determine what is and isn't possible, what can and cannot happen in the universe. And for them to be able to do that, they have to be necessary.
Wait, why? That's the part I'm missing. Like if something that can be contingent, like the law of gravity, and determine.
I don't mean logically necessary. I don't mean that they have to be logically necessary. They have to be necessary in the sense that in any physically possible world, that is, in any world that is like ours, with the same laws of nature and whatever, the laws of physics are constant. They exist in all possible worlds that are
No, they don't.
like
Why?
this one.
Like we can just change the laws of physics in a different world, and we still have science in this world. So, like, let's say we changed all the laws of physics, or just deleted them from a universe or something, in our universe they exist, and so in our universe we can do science just fine.
Right. What I'm saying, I'm saying that the laws of physics are physically necessary in a physically possible world. That is, in any um, world that is like ours, with the same laws of physics, basically. So the if you take a world with the same laws of physics like our universe, with just if you change up different things, the laws of physics are constant. And if the laws of physics are constant in that world, then things in that world would act in the same way under the same conditions. Does that make sense?
But sorry, we can still like grant that that's wrong. Say there's some that in the laws of physics are the exact same in a different world, but because of randomness or something, they do different things. Like that's fine. We'd still be able to do science.
Okay, hold on. Okay, let's say there is some possible world where pigs can fly,
Yeah.
right? Let's let's assume that there is some possible
Yeah.
world where pigs can fly. That world would not have the same laws of physics as our world.
Well, they could.
Do you agree with that?
No, like they could. Like it could just be a random quantum feature that pigs are flying or something in that universe.
But then it just goes against what we've already established, that the laws of physics explain why pigs cannot fly.
Because they don't. They're
Because
descriptions of regularities in nature. They don't explain anything. Pigs can't fly because of the laws of physics, but if there's a random feature in nature, then that's another law of physics.
I don't understand how you can say that pigs can't fly because of the laws of physics and then go around and say that the laws of physics don't explain why pigs cannot fly.
Because laws of physics don't explain anything. They are a thing.
What do you think explanation is?
An explanation is like a conceptual analysis of a reason a proposition is true or false.
It doesn't necessarily have to be. I think there are two different senses of explanation, and I think that's what brings up the confusion. There is an epistemic sense of explanation, and there is a metaphysical sense of explanation. The epistemic sense is perhaps the conceptual analysis of whatever they're talking about, where I'm trying to explain something. But the metaphysical sense is basically just a metaphysical explanation is uh, if A explains B metaphysically, then B is the case because of A or in virtue of A. So if the laws of physics explain why, metaphysically speaking, pigs cannot fly, it is because pigs cannot fly because the laws of physics are the way they are.
Unless there's a different law of physics, like a quantum law in which they can fly.
Exactly. We're basically agreeing that if the laws of physics were different, if there were some different laws of physics, then perhaps pigs could fly.
Yeah.
But the point is that if we have the same laws of physics in our universe,
Sure.
if the laws of physics are kept constant, then pigs cannot fly.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Right. Right. And so what I'm saying is that if that is the case, then for that to be the case, then the laws of physics have to be necessary. Necessary in the sense that they determine the possibility within this universe. So if you change the laws of physics, then you change what can and cannot occur.
Sure.
So in that sense, they are necessary.
What? There's
But
nothing necessary there. I'm not seeing how this is necessary. Like it's necessarily the case that for something to be a law of physics, it has to govern whatever's going on in the universe. Sure, but that's just like saying A is A. Reality is reality. So I'm not seeing how that's different from saying reality is reality.
I'm not sure what that has to do with anything.
Because
okay,
you're saying that
perhaps
if two universes are identical in every way physically, then they would have the identical outcomes in every way physically, and that this is some necessary truth. Well, it's obviously
oh no, that's not what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. If I could try and catch it out, what I'm saying is that if two universes have the exact same laws of nature, then if some event occurs under circumstance A in this universe, then in the same circumstances, the same event would occur in the other universe.
Right.
Right. And so that just means that in both universes, the laws of physics are constant. And so if we multiply the universes perhaps
Well,
indefinitely
no. So
to
that would not
have,
follow. Like they could change in both universes, and that the same thing would not happen. So the laws of physics don't need to be constant in either one for that to be the case.
right, but we're granting for the sake of argument that they are constant. I'm
Okay.
just trying to make a point.
Okay.
Right. So if we grant that the laws of physics are constant in, let's say, 1,000 universes,
Yeah.
then in 1,000 of those universes, under the same circumstances, the same thing would occur.
Yeah.
So if I kick a ball, if I drop a ball from a height in this universe, universe one, and it falls to the ground, it's going to fall to the ground under the same circumstances in universe 418,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And that's because the laws of physics are
Sure.
constant in those universes.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is that in that sense, the laws of physics are necessary if we restrict ourselves to the domain of those 1,000 universes.
Again, that just seems like reality is reality. That's like synonymous with that phrase. So if you're saying that if the things that govern reality, laws of physics, um, if they are necessarily have some implication that they will do X under these conditions, and they will do X no matter how many universes are the case. You're just saying an object that has the nature that will do this will do the thing that its nature requires it to do. So reality is reality. That's literally all you're saying there. You don't need God for that. It's just reality has a nature, and its nature will do the thing its nature will do. But the nature
But
can be contingent
here's my
just
point.
fine.
If here's my point. If we go along with the analogy, if we grant, if we then say, for example, that the laws of nature, that the laws of physics are contingent. Remember, we're still restricting ourselves to this
Yep.
1,000 universe.
Yep.
If we say that they are contingent, then that just means that they could be different in any of the universes. And what that entails is that if a ball is dropped and it falls down in universe A, that doesn't mean the same thing will happen under the same circumstances in universe 1000.
Well, no, that's wrong. So, like, in all the universes, if the laws of physics are the same thing will happen in all of them, even if they're all contingent.
Correct.
All contingent, same thing will happen. What
If,
means
if they are constant in in all the universes, that just means that they are necessary.
no, they can be all contingent and all have the exact same values in all of the universes and still be contingent.
I don't think that follows.
Yeah, it is.
Please remember that by universe here, I'm speaking of a possible world.
Yep.
You cannot say that if the laws of logic, for example, are true in all possible worlds, then it just follows that the laws of logic are necessary, that they are necessarily true.
Right. So if all
Yeah. So
possible worlds, there
in the
could just be
same
different
way,
laws of physics.
in the same way, if the laws of physics are constant in all possible universes, or in 1,000 possible universes, then that just means that they are necessary in the domain of those 1,000 universes. That is just, it's a simple entailment.
Right. So the laws of physics are contingent, and in 1,000 universes, they all share the same values. And if they all share the same values, they'll have the exact same result, and they can all be contingent and do that. So there's not a necessary requirement for those.
I just explained why they cannot be contingent and do that, because
Yeah, they can. So, like, if you're saying in all logically possible worlds, they will all be the same. Like, no, obviously not. They'll be different. And if they're different in different logical possible worlds, there'll be different outcomes. But in each of the worlds that they are the same, they will all have the same outcome.
Correct. My point, I'm trying to explain that if the laws of physics are constant across possible worlds, that just means that they are necessary.
Right. So if the laws of physics were Well, actually, no, that'd still be wrong. Well, so if the laws of physics had to be the same in all logically possible worlds, then they would have to be necessary, probably. But they don't.
Yeah, but calm down. I'm remember.
Calm down. I'm pretty calm.
Yeah, sorry about that. What I'm saying is that there are different domains or scopes of possibility. I use logical possibility as an example that because laws of logic are true in all logically possible worlds, it doesn't mean that they are necessary, that they are logically necessary. So if we take that as from as a starting point, it just means that if the laws of physics are the same in any number of possible worlds, that just means that within that domain, within that modal space, they are necessary. I'm not saying that they are logically necessary, but they are necessary when we kind of like narrow it down to those 1,000 possible worlds. That's just what necessity means.
No, not in any physics textbook. So necessary
But
means
I'm not
is
talking about physics. This is just
so no. So the
modal.
fact that they're the same in like a group of worlds, they are not necessary. In zero, there are no senses of the word that they are necessary, just because they're the same in 10 different worlds. So like there could be a pineapple that's the same in 10 different worlds. It doesn't mean that in those worlds the pineapple is necessary. That's just false.
That's literally what it means.
No, necessary means is true in all possible worlds. Like it doesn't mean is the same in all possible worlds. Like there are 10 worlds in which I am bald. Does it mean I'm necessary I'm bald? Well, no.
You're confusing the scope. If there is only one possible world, then it just follows that everything in that world is necessary. It all depends on the scope. Necessity is a how I put it is a scoped quantity, if I could say it like that.
No, so
When you
if
say
only one world is possible, then that world is necessary because it's the only possible world. So necessary
right,
means is all possible worlds, happens in all possible worlds. That's it. That's what necessary means in every context. It means all possible
you're
worlds.
right, you're correct. But take note that all there is a quantifier, and if we narrow the scope of that quantifier, then it just means the same thing.
Well,
If
no,
I
no. So
say that
it means that it narrows the scope of ontology. If you want to say that there's literally only one possible world and nothing else could happen ever under any circumstance, that's how you get a necessary one possible world. But you can't say there's like a billion possible worlds, um, and they all have the same laws of physics. But there's some other possible worlds that have different laws of physics. But in that billion, they're necessary. Like no, you have to say literally, it can't be the case that there are any differences in all possible worlds in entirety. So if you're saying that there's 1,000 possible worlds, that's literally all the possible worlds they are, and in all of those worlds, the laws of physics are the exact same, then you could say that the laws of physics are necessary. But that's not the case. You can clearly change the laws of physics. No one's saying you can't, and you can do fine science in any of those just fine. So you don't need necessary laws of physics that are possible or that can't be changed in any possible world. Like we can just grant there are other worlds with other laws of physics that change all the time, and like that's fine with us. We don't mind it. We can do science just fine. We don't doesn't matter whether the laws of physics are necessary for us.
I think what you're still not getting is that is this is the scope of necessity is not rigidly defined.
It is in
If
philosophy.
it is not, it simply is not. Conceptual possibility is different from perhaps physical possibility. Just because something can be conceived, it doesn't mean it's physically possible. So
Right,
that
right.
is a
So in philosophy, that's called nomenologically possible. And nomenologically possible means the law given the laws of physics.
right, correct. So my point is that um, if the laws of nature or the laws of physics are constant in a certain number of worlds, then provided that we restrict the scope of possibility, they are necessary. They are nomologically necessary.
No, that is not the case. That doesn't make any sense. Like nomenological is saying given our current laws of physics, nowhere says that they can't be different. Like they grant they can be different. It's just that's called logical possibility or metaphysical possibility. Like so, possible worlds. There is no like nomenologically necessary impossible worlds. It's not a thing. Seems like because it seems like what you're doing is you're conflating. You're trying to say that because let's just grant nomenological possibility is in all possible worlds, and you're trying to make nomenological possibility metaphysical possibility, which doesn't work. But I don't even understand why you think that would change anything.
I'm not doing that. All I'm
That's exactly
what
what
I'm
you're doing.
the point the entire point I'm trying to make is that the laws of nature have to be necessary in some sense, not the logical sense, not the metaphysical sense,
Well, I'm not
but
seeing
in
that sense
some
because they're
sense,
not nomenologically necessary either.
the laws of physics are not nomenologically necessary.
No, you can change them. They have been changed. The gravity was repulsive at the early universe. Like nobody thinks the laws of physics are necessary in any sense. It's
Uh,
we think that for things to happen the way that we see them, the consequences are a necessary result of the laws of physics, but nobody thinks the laws of physics are necessary.
I think this is just semantic. If we can forget the laws of physics phraseology, we can just say laws of nature or whatever. Um, the I
Yeah, I
think
think those are the same.
we we've already established that um, it is because of these laws that certain things cannot happen within the
Sure.
universe, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and we've also established that um, in a universe that has the same laws, the same things will happen under the same circumstances, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, my point is that if these laws were
We're
continued,
getting so one sec. The wind is like breaking up. I can't hear you. All right. Go now. Try now. Or whenever
is it
you.
better now?
Yep. Now it's better.
All right. Yeah. So the point is that if these laws were contingent, if they were different, if they could be different, then it just follows that nothing is guaranteed. If, for example, if we were to say that it is impossible for pigs to fly, then the laws the laws of physics have to be a certain way in order for that to be the case. I think we've already established that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
like, if the laws of physics govern the universe and there is no law of physics that allows pigs to fly, then pigs cannot fly.
right, correct, sure. And here's the main point is that um, if the I'm sorry, yeah, if the laws of physics are a certain way, then pigs cannot fly. So my
Right.
point is that in order for science to be possible, there has to be some there have to be some impossibilities in the world. So if every time we perform an experiment, for example, literally anything is possible, then we cannot make any consistent inferences necessary for science.
Well, so I'm missing that part because we can, if anything is possible, we don't care. We're totally fine with that. It doesn't matter with the science whatsoever. Like we're happy to just grant anything is possible. So I don't understand why you think that matters, first of all. But secondly, it seems like science can provide that while being contingent. So even if it's contingent, it can still um, prevent things from happening. So if it's, let's say the law of gravity is contingent, but in every universe, or maybe you're thinking that there are some universes where the laws of physics don't govern things or something. So even if the laws of physics there, then it doesn't matter because pigs can fly because the law of gravity doesn't govern pigs in universe X. Therefore, because the fact that laws of physics govern the universe is a contingent fact, then it's logically possible to have a universe that the laws of physics doesn't govern. Maybe that's the argument you're trying to make, like, but I don't think it matters.
No, here, perhaps I can make my point clear with an example. Let's say that we observe, let's say we're doing science and we observe that, um, let's say that every time we drop a ball from a height above the ground, it falls down. If, let's say, we then make the the conclusion that there is some kind of law or gravity that ensures that whenever a ball is dropped, it falls to the ground. Let's say we make that conclusion,
Yeah.
but then, unbeknownst to us, there is no law of physics that guarantees that.
Right.
It just means that we're wrong.
Yep.
We're wrong that it is impossible for a ball to go up when we throw it down.
Right.
So that means that in order for us to be able to gain knowledge through science, there has to be, whether we know about it or not, there has to be constant laws that guarantee that certain things are impossible.
No, I'm not following that. It seems like you're just doing science wrong. So it seems like you're claiming that if you have a hypothesis that there is a law that governs the universe, that's your belief. Then the only way for you to have knowledge is if there is actually a law like that, which I would agree. But I would say scientists don't do that. They do it better. They say there is a regularity in nature. We don't know if it's a law. We don't know if it's percent chance, whatever. There is a regularity that this tends to happen. And that's a belief, and so they can be true. Is it the case that in reality this happens most of the time? And they can be like, yes, it does. That's a true statement. And so that can be knowledge, even without a law. There could be zero laws. Say there are no laws at all, and it just happens to be the case due to random chance that objects mostly fall. If a scientist believes objects mostly fall and their justification is the observation that it does, they have a justified true belief. And so you can still have knowledge with no laws.
How I don't see how that is knowledge when it's just you're lucky that you're right.
Well, the belief is that most things mostly fall. So it just says things mostly fall. That's the belief. And the reason I believe that is because I drop things and they mostly fall. So that's a justification. So I have a justification through my experience for the belief. And let's say in the universe, it happens to be true, just by luck, that things mostly fall. Now I have knowledge because I have a justified true belief. So I mean that I don't see how that would be a problem where I have a belief, the belief is justified by some experience, and it happens to be true in the universe, then I would have a
I don't
justified
think
true belief.
I don't think that that is a justification at all
Why?
because if because the fact it is true just by chance. There is nothing that um makes you even more certain than not that that thing is true.
I'm
You
not
understand what I'm
following.
saying?
My belief has nothing to it doesn't claim anything about what makes it true. It doesn't say anything about anything making it true. My belief is simply that things mostly fall. That's my belief. I don't know why. I don't care why. It's not relevant to my position. It's just things mostly fall. And I
Yeah,
base
but
this
you're
belief off of my experience that when I drop things, they mostly fall. Now, that belief doesn't say anything about what causes this or why this is. It just says it's the case. And so if I look at reality, make a justified belief based on reality, and it is the case in reality, I have a justified true belief, and I don't make any claims about why it's the case or how it's the case. It just is the case.
right. So the proposed justification is the experience,
Well,
but
that's yeah, yeah,
the problem is that experience is particular in nature, and
yeah.
a particular experience cannot justify a general truth without a more general principle that that might connect the particular experiences under some rule or
Wait, why?
generality.
I don't see that at all. Like I can have a
If
general
I
experience. Like wait. So like I have a general experience that I don't know. blondes are
You cannot
prettier than
have a general
brunettes.
experience. You cannot
Yeah,
have general experience.
yeah,
Experience is
right,
particular in nature. When I experience
right,
this
right. So
rock,
by general, I mean it happens more often for me. It happens more often for me that I find
right,
blondes more
right.
attractive than brunettes. And so
What you
I
have,
can generalize that blondes are more attractive generally than brunettes in the world. Now, it could be the case that this is true. Now, it's purely by random chance, by evolution or whatever. It's not like it's determined by physics that this happened. In which case, I would be right. I would be true. My belief would be true that more blondes are attractive than brunettes. But it's not because of anything. It's not like it's determined. It's just luck. Like so, I use a different example. Let's say that more dice land on evens than odds. Let's say I roll 10 dice and like 7 of them are even and 3 of them are odd. And based off of this, I come to the belief that more dice land even than odd. Now, it could be the case if we had like God level knowledge, we could look at all of the dice in the universe and look, oh, 800 trillion billion dice have been rolled and half of them plus 1 are even. In which case I'd be right. I would have a correct belief that over half of the dice have been rolled even, based on my experience, even though it's by pure random chance. There's no law of the universe that governs this. It just happens to be the case that most dice have been rolled even. And I believe that most dice have been rolled even. Therefore, I have a justified true belief. I have knowledge that most dice have been rolled even with no reason.
what I'm saying is that you don't have justification because there is no way to know to have, like I said, there's no way to have that God level knowledge. So you cannot know that there is no actual good reason for you to think that you are correct, even though your belief ended up being true by chance. You did not have any good reason to think that you were right. So it's not justified.
Well, I'm not seeing how it's not justified. So a justification is anything that increases the probability of a proposition being true. So if I am a kid, 6-year-old kid, and I roll a bunch of dice and they mostly land even, I now have a reason to believe. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a good reason, but it's a reason to increase the probability of me thinking that dice more often roll even than odd. So I have a justification because justification, all it requires
I
is something
disagree
that
that
increases the
that is a
probability of the proposition
justification.
being true.
I don't think if it's not a good reason, then it's not a justification at all.
Sure. What I'm not sure what you mean by that. There's no such thing as a good justification in philosophy. It either is a justification or it's not a justification. Justification is anything that increases the probability of a proposition being true. That's it. So I don't know what you mean by good justification there.
I said good reason.
Yeah, yeah. So
You,
reason and justification would be synonyms here. So I don't understand, like, a good reason or a justification are just anything that increases the probability of a proposition being true. That's it. So if I see even landing more than odd, I have a reason to believe that it happens to be the case that dice roll evens more than odds. And if in the
what you have
universe,
is what you have is a reason to believe that dice roll even more than odd within the domain of your past experience. There
yeah,
is no reason to generalize that to encompass the entirety of the dice in the universe.
what do you mean? I'm not seeing so yet. Why not? Like if all ducks is just induction, like if all geese I see are white, it's reasonable for me to think the next geese I see will be white, all of them.
It is not justified unless we add the extra um, thesis of the uniformity of nature.
No, I don't need to add that at all. I can just say, given my experience, this is what I experienced, and so I expect it to be the same, even though I can expect that it's wrong at some point. I can expect that
But
there's a black duck out there.
why why should your past experience have anything to do with your future experience
Why should my
without
past
uniformity of nature? Like, why should your past experience provide any kind of rule or
that's the hypothesis. So the
insight?
hypothesis is if the past if the future is going to be the same as the past, I will make a testable prediction that the future experience will be the same as the past. I do an experiment and I confirm that experience, and so that gives me a justification to believe that the future experience will be the same as the past experience.
No, your experiment only gives you justification for your past experience. It has nothing to do with the future.
No, so that's the
It has,
hypothesis. So the hypothesis is if the future will be the same, then I will be able to do a test to confirm this. I do a test, the test is confirmed. That's evidence of the hypothesis, and the hypothesis is the future will be the same. So that is evidence of the future being the same.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I didn't really get what you said.
Yeah. So if I have a hypothesis, something is true. The hypothesis is the future is the same, and I do an experiment, and that experiment is confirmed. That experiment was evidence of my hypothesis, whatever my hypothesis was. And so in this case, my hypothesis was the future will be the same. And so when I do the experiment and get the results that I'm looking for, that's evidence that the future is the same as the past. I've given a justification for me believing that the future is the same as the past because that was my hypothesis, and the experiment confirms the hypothesis.
Okay, so if I get what you're saying that you hypothesize that the future will be like the past.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you perform an experiment or you do something, and when that happens, that serves as confirmation of your hypothesis.
Yep.
Yeah, but the problem is that it doesn't still justify the principle, because what you just have is a confirmation of the hypothesis in the past. It doesn't mean that the hypothesis will be confirmed in the future. And so basically, in order for your experiments to be evidence of your hypothesis, you would need to assume the hypothesis that you're trying to prove, which is just vicious circular.
That's fine. That's literally what you do with any test. You assume the hypothesis is true, calculate the results, and then experiment to see if the results match the expected value. So with any hypothesis, what you do is you start assume it's true.
You're not confirming the hypothesis, then you're just assuming your conclusion.
Well, no. The way any hypothesis works is you assume it's true and then predict the expected results if it's true. Like, so if God is real, I would expect that when I die, I will meet him at the pearly gates and be judged, blah, 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 blah. And if that happens, that would be confirmation of the hypothesis, because it predicted that this would be the consequence if the hypothesis was true. So it's not circular reasoning. You're not assuming the conclusion and then stopping. You're assuming the conclusion to be able to predict a result. And if the result happens, then you are justified in believing the hypothesis. Circular reasoning happens when you just assume the conclusion and stop.
I understand that. I understand that that's what's supposed to be happening. That is the kind of hypothetical deductivism. But what I'm saying is that in this particular case, what you're doing is your hypothesis here is that the future will be like the past.
Yeah.
And your proposed evidence of this hypothesis is the fact that the future has been like the past.
Yeah.
In the past.
Sure, and that's not a problem.
But the problem here is that evidence does not it does not imply that the future will be like the past in the future. So, but
that's a part of the hypothesis. That's an entailment of the hypothesis. So like you can add in whatever you want into any hypothesis. Let's say I believe in magical pixie leprechauns or something. And if I believe in magical pixie leprechauns, I will predict the next lottery numbers or something. If I predict the next lottery numbers, that's evidence of magical pixie leprechauns. Even though we've never seen one, we've never experienced one, all I did was predict the next lottery numbers correctly. So my ability to predict the future based on some hypothesis justifies all of the entailments of the hypothesis, every single one of them, even if not all of the entailments were demonstrated directly. If my confirmatory justification will justify all of the entailments, I don't need to justify each one individually with some kind of a test. And so if I have like entailment 1, the universe will be the same in the future always or something. And if this is the case, the universe will be the same in 5 seconds by me dropping a rock or whatever. If I drop a rock and it's the same, that's evidence of everything in the hypothesis, all of it, the whole thing. Is obviously it's less evidence for the further you go out into the hypothesis, but it's evidence for the entirety of the entire thing.
Right. The point I'm making is that the only way that experiment or event or whatever can count as evidence is if you assume that the future will be like the past. Notice that in
Well, that's
other
the
cases,
hypothesis. So that's you can start with anything
right.
you want in a hypothesis.
Notice that in other cases, in your example of the leprechauns or pixies or whatever, let's say you predict the um, the lottery number.
Yeah.
That we can count that as evidence because um, they are independent. So we don't need to assume that there actually exist these leprechauns or pixies in order for you predicting the number to count as evidence. But in this case, the only way we can say that these experiments are evidence that the future will be like the past is if we assume that the future is already like the past. So we're not confirming the hypothesis. We're just assuming what we're trying to give evidence for.
Well, no, again, that's not an issue. So you can assume whatever you want. Like any
It is
hypothesis,
an
you can
issue.
assume anything
It
you
is
want
an issue.
ever. No, it's not.
It
It's not
is
an
an
issue at
issue.
all. It's not.
If I'm trying to show that the future is like the past, I cannot then go and just assume that the future is like the past. We're
Yeah, you
trying to
can. There's no
find
problem.
evidence.
There's absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. So, like, I can say, if I believe God exists, then I can assume God exists, and I can do some testable prediction that God is entailed in. So, if heaven exists, God must exist. So, like, let's say we're in heaven, and I think heaven exists, or I think God exists. So, let's do some experiment to see if God exists. I'm going to blaspheme or something, and then He does something. Well, that's fine. Like all of that's fine. So you can assume the past is the same. You can assume that it's going to be the same, and do tests off of that, and you're perfectly justified. Totally fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever.
You're not assuming the hypothesis. What you're doing is you're trying to list what the predictions of the hypothesis are.
Yeah.
That's totally different.
Yeah.
Sure. When we're doing this, we can try and if we assume the hypothesis is true, then try to see what would be true if it were true, like the prediction, what we would expect if it
Yeah.
were true. But that's a whole different thing from assuming that it is true and then having our evidence also assume that it is true. When we do that, we're not confirming anything. We're just restating what we're trying to demonstrate.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. It's still a justification, so it's not a problem.
I don't think circular arguments can justify anything.
The other can, they can just fine, but like, what's the
Well, if they
problem here?
can, then I can justify literally anything through circular reasoning.
If you can predict the future, yeah, absolutely. So if you can use circular reasoning to accurately predict the future, then you can justify the circular reasoning. Like if you can use non-standard logic to predict the future, you can justify non-standard logic. So if I said a logical contradiction, a square is a circle or something, and therefore I can predict the future, and you get it right, that justifies the round squares. You can justify anything if you can predict the future. But I'm not seeing what the issue is here. So like,
I'm not sure why.
How do you think God solves this problem?
We've gone on a long tangent here, but my point has always been that for science to be possible, there has to be regularity and uniformity in nature.
Well, that's been false in every one of the examples. We haven't needed any of those.
So you do not think that science requires regularity?
No, it doesn't. Well, it requires regularities, yes. It doesn't require any necessary anything.
It requires regularity.
Yeah, which don't require any necessary thing. Contingent things can have regularities. 100% contingent things can be perfectly regular.
I just explained why that was not the case.
Wait,
because,
what is like? So I don't. Let's say justification. Like everything in nature is perfectly regular and perfectly contingent. What is the logical contradiction in everything in nature being perfectly contingent but also perfectly regular?
Because if it's contingent, then there are some possible worlds in which it is false. And if there are some,
but that doesn't matter. All that matters is in this world is regular. Doesn't matter. It can be different in all possibles. I don't care. In this world is regular.
What do you think regularity is?
It means the same in one world. Consistent in one world.
I don't think that's what I think perhaps that's why we're talking past each other.
Well, that's all that's
What I
required
mean
in
by-
science. To do science, it just needs to be consistent in one world. We don't care what happens in the other worlds. It makes no difference. All we need in our world is consistent in ours. To do science, all only needs to be consistent in our world.
Right. But what I'm saying is that we're talking past each other because it seems we're using different senses of the term. What I'm
So
saying
let's
is
go
that
back to the science thing. Science, the only thing that's required for science is the laws are consistent in our world. No one cares about the other ones. Possible worlds don't matter. Zero difference.
well, I don't think that is the case because if there are possible worlds that are like the same as ours, and there are certain things that happen in those worlds that don't happen here, then there is no regularity. For example, if pigs can fly in some possible worlds with the same laws of physics as our world, then the laws of physics are not then there is no regularity at all.
Wait, that doesn't matter. Like, we can still do science in our world. Like, if there's some other world where pigs can fly, we can still do science in ours. So we don't need what
If
you're saying is regularity is irrelevant.
if that other possible world has the same laws of physics, it just means that the laws of physics do
That's
not rule
irrelevant.
out.
You're bringing up an irrelevancy. It literally doesn't
It's
make
not
a difference.
irrelevant. It's
I don't care
literally
what happens in
very
the other world. So let's say there is another world with the exact same laws of physics and pigs fly. It's not in this world. So I can still do science in this world just fine. And I can do science in that world
no,
too.
no, you can't because
Why? Why do you
remember
think that?
we said that because the laws of physics do not rule out the flying pig, basically.
Yeah, but I don't care. Like, I can do science just fine based off of probabilities. I can do science just fine whether or not I'm in either universe. In either universe, I can still do science. So I'm not seeing why you think I can't do science
I don't
in
know.
either universe.
I don't understand what you mean by do science, but the point I've been hammering all along is that scientific knowledge would be impossible because there has to be some type of regularity.
Well, that's the part I disproved earlier. So when you claim that, like, there's some law of physics or whatever, that I believe things fall because there's a universal gravity force that never changes, you're doing science wrong. That's not how science is done. Science says there's a regularity, things happen. And if there's a regularity, even if there's no law governing it, you can still do science. So in a universe with flying pigs and in a universe with no flying pigs, we can still say we're doing science because we believe there's a regularity.
We're back to this notion of regularity. I need you to explain that notion for me. What do you take regularity to mean?
Any consistent pattern in anything.
Consistent pattern.
Yeah.
So that means under the same circumstances.
No. I don't care about the circumstances. I just need a pattern. The pattern can be random. The pattern could be dice rolling more even than odd. That's a consistent pattern. There doesn't need to be a reason behind it. There just needs to be a consistent pattern.
A consistent pattern.
Yep.
I don't see how anything could be consistent if you're not saying that under the same circumstances the same thing will happen. It's
like dice. If I roll dice and more of them are even than odd, that's a consistent pattern and nothing is causing it.
All right. So take this example. If water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius in one instance, but freezes at 50 degrees Celsius in another instance, in the same universe, is that a consistent pattern?
If it does one more than the other, yes.
Okay, so if water freezes at 0 degrees 2 times and only it freezes at 50 degrees once, then that is a consistent pattern.
Yep.
I disagree.
Well, you're wrong because we can do science.
I disagree because it doesn't that.
Well, let's take your example. So water freezes twice at one temperature and once at another temperature. Can we do science with just that information? Yes, we can do science with that information. That is still science.
In what way? What science can you do with that?
You can make hypotheses. You can make predictions. You can do tests. You can have
prediction. What prediction can you make from that information?
That'll happen twice as much at this temperature than at the other temperature.
That's just false.
It doesn't matter if it's false. You can do science. Science is making predictions.
If it's false, then there is no knowledge that can be gained from
Well,
it.
no. You can make predictions off of it. So based on your predictions, you can make correct predictions. So if you predict that the next one will be one temperature, not the other, and you get it right, you have knowledge.
You don't, because there
You
is
do.
no justification. There
No,
is no
that's the if you
justification.
make a successful prediction, that's a justification by definition.
Oh no, it's not. No,
Yes,
it's
it
not.
is. Yes, it is. If you can
No,
make a
it's not
successful prediction in
justification.
the future, you have a justification.
If I predict that um, that the killing of a virgin is going to make the sun rise tomorrow, and I kill a virgin, and it happens that the sun rises tomorrow.
Well, again, that's
I
you
think
doing
that,
bad science. You doing science bad. So if you predict I will kill a virgin and the sun will rise tomorrow, you can get knowledge. Yeah. If you say it's because I killed a virgin, you would be wrong. If you just say I will kill a virgin and it will do tomorrow, you'll be right. So you can you're just making overly
but it's
entailed
not. Then
statements.
it's not science. It's not
That's
science.
still science. It's still science.
If I
It's still
say
science.
if I say that killing a virgin, if I say that I will kill a virgin and the sun will rise tomorrow, just that, then what is the science there?
Just the consequence. So if you can make a prediction of actions and predict the consequence,
Unless I
you can do
predict that the
science.
sun will rise tomorrow on the basis of my killing a virgin,
Then you'd be
that's when
wrong. Then that would just be a wrong hypothesis. You'd still be doing
Exactly.
science. You'd just be wrong.
Exactly. Then it's a false belief, right? So it doesn't
Yes,
yield
it's
any
a false
knowledge.
belief.
Doesn't yield any knowledge.
Right. So that's just
Doesn't
a false belief.
knowledge.
You can still do science. You can still get right beliefs. That one would just be false. So having one example of one false hypothesis isn't an example you can't do science. That's just saying you have one false hypothesis. Like obviously you can get false hypotheses while doing science.
My point isn't about whether or not we can do science, whatever that means. My point is whether science
Yes,
can
yes,
yield
you can gain
knowledge of-
scientific knowledge while some hypotheses are wrong. Yes.
Yeah, but you cannot gain scientific knowledge if you do not have justification for
Yes, I have justification.
prediction.
So let's say in your example where there's water, I claim that there is a regularity in nature that is freezes at one temperature more than another. If it is the case that in this universe, purely by random chance, that it freezes more at this temperature than the other temperature, I now have done science. I don't need any more.
But
so how did I not do science there? Right. How is that not science?
You do not have justification.
No. So water freezes more at this temperature than this temperature. I've observed it. I have a justification. I have a belief that the water freezes more at this temperature. Wait. So I've seen the water freeze more at this temperature than this temperature. I form a belief that it freezes more at this temperature and this temperature in the universe. I now have a belief. I have a justification. And if it's the case in the universe that this is true, I now have knowledge.
Right.
So how do I not do science just there?
My point again is that your experience is not justification.
Yes, it is. How is that not justification?
Unless we assume, again, we're coming back to this, that the future and the past are connected in a way.
Not a problem. I can assume that, and if I do a test and it's confirmed, that's justification. So it's perfectly fine.
Right. We're back to where we were the other time. Where
yes, and you have not explained in any way how this is a problem. So I still haven't presented a problem.
I'm pointing out that it is a vicious circle. And circular reasoning does not use justification.
Doesn't make a difference. If I can make novel predictions about the future and get it right, I have justification. Doesn't matter what kind of reasoning I use. If I use a self-contradiction, if I use a self-contradiction, P and not P at the same time, and I can predict the future, my justification is I have a justification. So if I say round squares cause the lottery numbers to be this, and I get it right, I have a justification. So it doesn't matter if I use circular reasoning. It doesn't matter if I use logically inconsistent reasoning. If I can predict the future, it's justified.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can agree to disagree, because I do not believe that circular reasoning is rational, and I do not believe that circular reasoning or logically inconsistent reasoning can use justification.
Well, you're just wrong, though. It's a fact.
If we cannot agree on this basic principle of rationality, then I don't think that we have enough common ground.
Well, no, this is a fact in philosophy, so it's not really up to debate.
Totally,
but I can just grant it. I can just grant for the sake of the argument. Let's say we're not allowed to use circular reasoning or something. How do you think your God does not use circular reasoning? Because your God follows fails all of the problems even worse than any of the principles I've described. So how do you think your God can actually solve these problems when it actually suffers them worse?
What does that have to do with anything? The point is whether or
It's
not circular reasoning
logical
can
inconsistency. You are using circular reasoning. So if you
How?
think there's a necessary being, that's circular reasoning. So if you think a
How?
necessary being is required, that's circular reasoning. So how do you think
How?
God solves this problem without using circular reasoning?
Well, that's pretty simple.
Okay, how?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple because I believe that he governs the world through his providential control, and he governs the world in a way that makes it regular because he is an
And
orderly God and is not an author of confusion. And so he is.
and how did you learn about this?
That's not the point. You asked me
No,
how.
circular reasoning.
You asked me
Remember,
how God.
so circular reasoning you're using is you're saying you learned about God via a book which was written by God, right?
How is that circular reasoning?
So your conclusion is God exists, and your source is God.
So I cannot tell you about my existence. How is that circular?
What? Your existence? I believe in your existence, but God's existence is not the case. So the circular reasoning is using your epistemic standard, starts with the assumption that your conclusion is true, and with no evidence.
How does it do that? I'm not seeing how any of this is the case.
God exists because God wrote the Bible. The Bible is true because God said so.
I'm not seeing how that is circular reasoning. If I write a note,
so A is true because B is true because A.
If I write a note and I write, my name is Daniel, and I write stuff about myself, and I give you that note, is that note enough justification to believe in my existence?
Well, no, because you gave it to me. So if I found a note like on the side of the road, and the note says this note was written by Daniel and Daniel exists, then it would be circular reasoning for me to believe Daniel exists based off of nothing else, because there's no other information.
But there is this information.
Right, which is circular if I don't have any other information. Like if I have other information, like humans exist, there's empirical data, humans exist, there's empirical data that humans write letters. If I have all this other data, then I can conclude you do. But if I have nothing but a book, or let me give you another example. Let's say that we have a book that says the magical leprechaun Bob wrote this note, and the magical leprechaun Bob exists. Would I be rational to believe in the magical leprechaun Bob?
No.
Why?
Because obviously it depends on the kind of claim the leprechaun Bob is making. If the leprechaun Bob is just an alias, then you have justification. But if it's actually talking about
magical shamrock wielding pot of gold holding leprechaun, so says he's an actual metaphysical leprechaun, says he exists on the sheet of paper, am I reasonable to believe?
Have justification for that.
Right. And so the same thing holds true of God. If you think a magical, anthropomorphic, non-physical, wait. So, no, it doesn't.
It does. You're breaking the question.
No, I'm using the same thing you just said. So it depends on the kinds of claims. You said that belief in the leprechaun would depend on the kinds of claims it makes, right? That's what you said, right?
Right.
And so belief in God would also depend on the kinds of claims it makes, right?
The difference, though, is that
wait. So the same standard holds true for both, correct? The kinds of claims it makes is what makes it reasonable to justify in the leprechaun and in God, right? It's the same for both.
Correct.
Okay. And so the kinds of claims it makes, the ones that are justified are claims that have an empirical basis, that have been shown to exist independent of our imagination. If anything has not been shown to exist independent of our imagination, it is not reasonable to believe based off of a text. And so the criterion that we can use to determine is it rational to believe that any being exists based off of some textual document is if the properties of that being have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. Properties of leprechaun have not, properties of God have not, properties of Bob have.
I don't agree with that, because you're assuming, here's the fundamental mistake you're making. You're assuming that God breathed media is the same as some random leprechaun Bob or whatever. But
no, I'm not assuming that at all. So remember what I said specifically. I said the criterion is properties that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination, properties that have not been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. So anything that has any one property that has not yet been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination is unreasonable to believe based off of a text. That includes miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, UFOs. Any claim on text that includes any of those properties, because they haven't been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination, are unreasonable to believe. So I'm not assuming that God is the same as a leprechaun. I'm saying that his properties have not been demonstrated to exist, just like a leprechaun's properties have not been
Then
demonstrated to exist.
I just disagree with that. I don't agree with that at all.
Which
I don't
part?
see any reason to
Which part?
believe that the properties of God have not been demonstrated to exist.
Non-physical minds, necessary, omniscient, omnibenevolent. Which one of those has been demonstrated to exist?
All of them.
Wait, what?
All of them.
How do you demonstrate those are not imaginary?
The evidence is God's own testimony.
Do you remember that circular reasoning thing we went? So, like, if I said the evidence of the magical leprechaun who has shamrocks and gold is the fact that it says he has shamrocks and gold in his little book that he's written, would that be reasonable to believe?
No, but that's not what I'm saying.
Wait, what? How is that different from what you just said?
What I'm saying is that God has made clear his own existence and his own nature and property. The leprechaun, whatever, has not done that.
Say that again.
Can you hear me?
Yep. You said he made clear something through prophecy, I think is what you said.
I say he has made clear his own nature, his existence, and his property. But the
properties.
The other being has not done that.
So I'm not sure what you mean here. What has God done that the leprechaun has not done?
Revealed himself.
How?
Well, he has revealed himself through the created order and through special revelation in Scripture.
I'm not understanding. Like, what is it that has done that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So you're saying that God has demonstrated himself to exist in a way the leprechaun has not demonstrated itself to exist, which is how? Like specific examples, not just like specific example.
The created order, everything.
What does that mean?
The very existence of the world, and through
what does that mean?
Revelation in Scripture.
I don't know. What does that mean? Give me like a particular example.
Any fact, take anything we can see, the sky, the sand on the beach, whatever. All those things are God's way of revealing himself to everyone.
Again, there's not any like a premise conclusion. Trees exist, therefore God how?
Sorry?
So you said everything in reality is an example of this thing that God is doing or whatever, and I don't understand how. So I'm like, take an example like a tree. Trees exist. How does trees existing evidence of God?
Just the same way, for example, the voice of a friend is evidence that they are the ones speaking on the phone.
Well, the reason a voice of a friend is evidence they're speaking on the phone is because we have past empirical data of how phones work and how sound is transmitted through those phones and the kinds of things required for sound to be created on the other end of the phone. I don't see any evidence of God being on the other end of a phone. So phones have empirical evidence. I don't see how God is relatable in the same way as empirical evidence.
Well, it's analogous because God, the same way experience has conditioned us to be able to recognize the voice of a friend on the other end of the phone. It's the same way we've been conditioned by being created in God's image to recognize his handiwork throughout creation.
Well, I don't recognize any of the handiwork, so I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
Well,
because I don't see that.
Of course, you're an atheist, but I'm just speaking from my position, from my own world.
So the question is how do you tell the difference between this thing you're talking about and your imagination?
What? How do I tell the difference?
Yeah.
I don't see how I cannot tell the difference. It's very clear that what I'm experiencing is different from an imagination.
How?
Well, obviously, this has to do with my private epistemic state, so it's not something that can be conveyed to you. But I could just ask the same question: how can you tell that the friend you're speaking to on the phone is not actually a robot or an AI, whatever?
Novel testable predictions.
Sorry?
Not novel testable predictions. So my method for differentiating imagination from reality is novel testable predictions and the ability to predict the future. If I can predict the future, I'm
But
rational to believe it.
everything can be undermined by the simple fact that it could be your imagination. So I'm not. The point I'm making is that I think it's
Well, no. So being able to predict the future is a justification to believe something is not your imagination. So if you can predict
why
the
is that?
future, you have
Why
a
is that?
reason to believe that it's not your imagination.
I don't believe so, but that is beside the point anyway. Because the point I'm making is that
Well, let's
the thing,
compare. So my methodology is the ability to predict the future. Your methodology is you feel like it or something. You feel like you have a message from God.
the
Which do you
ability to
think is more
predict the
rational?
future does not prove that something is not imagined. Because
Wait, say that again.
the ability to predict the future is not evidence that something is not imagined, because the very fact of the prediction coming true could be an imagination. So I'm not sure how that solves anything.
Well, again, so justification is just something that increases the probability of a proposition being true. It doesn't need to be 100%. So mine predicting the future, if it is the case that, I don't know, I'm right, and I predict the future that if I'm right, this is true, is it more likely that the hypothesis is true, or is it more likely that it's untrue, that what I predict happens? So like if I predict the world is round, the sun will rise tomorrow, is that more likely if I'm correct that the sun is actually, or the earth is round, or is that more likely if I'm wrong?
Again, the issue is that even if your prediction comes true, its coming true could also be an imagination. So
That doesn't matter.
I'm not sure.
So the justification is anything that increases
Well,
the
it matters because
probability of it being true.
it doesn't increase the probability at all.
Well, it does. So is it more
Because
likely that if I can
even if
predict,
it
like if I
were,
let's say there's 10 options, like 10 different buckets or something, and you place I don't know, a item in one of the buckets. If I can predict which of those 10 buckets it is 5 times in a row, and I say this is because I have a magical leprechaun whispering in my ear, does the ability of me being able to predict the bucket you placed it in 10 times in a row increase the probability that it's true that I have a leprechaun whispering in my ear?
yeah, that is different though. It
Well, no,
does,
that's
but
the
that's
same
different.
thing. It's the exact same thing.
But the problem is that things could be the exact same, even whether or not um, it's an imagination. So it
Well,
doesn't.
that's the
It
true of
doesn't.
the leprechaun too. That's exactly the same. I could have just guessed them all by luck. I could have just luckily guessed the thing you picked 5 times in a row, and there's no leprechaun, purely figment of my imagination. But because I guessed them correctly, that increases the probability that it was a leprechaun. So even though it could still be imaginary, still just completely imaginary, it still increases the probability. So it's still evidence, even though it doesn't prove it's not imaginary. So I think you're confusing proof and evidence here. I don't need to be able to prove it's not imaginary. I don't need to be able to eliminate 100% that it's imaginary. I just need anything that can increase the probability of it being not imaginary. So even if it's like completely a figment of my imagination and I just guessed it, say I know for a fact that I just guessed it, it still increases the probability that it's a leprechaun, because of my ability to use that information to try to make predictions that were happen to be correct.
Right. So let's grant that. I'm not sure what point this makes, because we both have epistemic access to both our imagination and reality. So I'm not sure what exactly the point is.
Um, my prediction actually qualifies as justification to differentiate imagination from reality, but I don't not seeing how yours does.
It does, because I can be acquainted with reality in a way that I can differentiate it from imagination. I don't think this is something that is too far fetched. I think everyone does this.
How?
Everyone knows.
Well, the question
Everyone
is how.
knows
So, like, if we have 10 people
how.
who all claim that they are acquainted with reality or whatever, what can you do differently than them to show that you actually are? What I can do is I can predict the future.
what I don't understand. How could you? The fact is that that prediction could also be an imagination. I'm
Doesn't
not
make a difference.
sure
That part's
exactly
irrelevant. So it
what.
doesn't matter. Again, all it has to do is increase the probability. So the question is if we have 10 people who all claim that they have access to reality, in order for you to be justified that yours is correct and theirs are incorrect, you need to show something that you can do that they cannot do. So what do you have that your access to reality can do that others can't do? Because mine can predict the future. What can you do?
I'm not sure what point you're making, because it seems to me you're just saying that if we have people with different with conflicting claims, how do we show which one is correct? So the
Well,
answer is simple. We go through the same process we go through anytime we're trying to resolve debate. It could be through rational argumentation or through empirical evidence or whatever. I'm not sure what exactly the point is supposed to be.
well, sort of, yeah. So the question is if we both claim to know or both claim to have knowledge of reality, how do we determine one is right and one is wrong? You have to have some ability to interact with reality in order to show one corresponds and one does not. Now, my way of showing correspondence is I can make testable predictions about the future. That's pretty good. Most people think that's a really, really good one. Like if I pick something mundane, like
Everyone can make testable predictions about reality. So I don't
well, just wait.
understand.
What do you mean by that? Because that's actually really hard. Very few people can do that and get them correct consistently. That's like one of the hardest things to do in the world. So I don't know what you mean by that. Everybody can claim they have access to a book. Everyone can claim they have access to a fundamental nature of reality. Everybody can claim they have an indisputable source of knowledge, but no one that's like anybody and their like 6-year-old kid can do that. But what's hard is accurately predicting novel information about the world. Nobody can do that. Almost nobody. Like
Oh,
zero
so
point
wait,
zero 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 zero
is your
something.
is your question how we can show that our view or our source of information is the right one?
Sort of. So my question is how does the method you're using compare to the method I'm using? So my method is novel testable predictions, and I want you to give me what your method is, and is
Okay,
it more or better than mine of novel testable predictions?
my method of adjudicating between worldviews is transcendental analysis, and I don't actually think that prediction can actually resolve the difference between worldviews.
Right. I know, I'm sure you don't, but so let's say anybody can do transcendental analysis. Anybody can make up their own worldview and claim it's perfect.
Yeah, everybody can do transcendental analysis, but not everybody can actually provide a worldview that actually meets the
Everybody can.
transcendental
Everybody can provide a
analysis.
worldview that is exactly equivalently as good as yours. No
No,
difference.
it
Everyone,
has.
everyone, everyone, everyone,
We've
everyone,
been
100%.
discussing this for almost 2 hours now, and
Yeah,
we
and
haven't shown
I've
how.
proved that you can present an equivalent one. Um, so like I can just say, let's say my worldview is a quantum field. There is a necessary being, and the necessary being is a quantum field, and the quantum field is a transcendental truth that accounts for all knowledge. So now I have done the same thing you've done. I've presented a transcendental truth that is not God. It's the quantum field, so it's not conscious, doesn't have intentions. It's just a quantum field, and it is the necessary being that is the precondition for intelligibility. Or I could pick a magical leprechaun, or I could pick Brahmic field, a non-conscious Brahmic field, or a karmic field. I could just pick any particular object I want, a platonic object, and say this object is the necessary precondition for intelligibility, and use all of the same arguments you do, and show that it works equally as well. So this is a terrible argument. It's like
Saying
saying,
so,
what?
the point is that saying so does not make it so, though. Just
Well,
saying
yeah,
that
I can
is
prove it. So
saying
I can prove it. So I've had
right.
many,
So
many conversations with precepts, and
wait,
I want to do that in a second, but I just want to say that it seems like to any rational mind that your methodology can be repeated and mirrored by everyone else, just like anyone can say the word potato. So common that like literally anybody can do it. But my method of novel testable predictions is one of the hardest things in the world to do. It is really, really hard to predict novel information about the future. And so if you,
but that does not matter, though. It doesn't matter whether it's hard, and does the fact that someone can claim that their
well, so
worldview
just to clarify
is
one second, the
transcendental
hardness is
necessary?
like, what matters in relevance to the hardness is the fact that uh, if it's really hard to do to accurately predict the future, it's more likely that someone who can predict the future using some hypothesis that hypothesis corresponds to reality. So if you're trying to predict something about reality and you use a hypothesis that entails something about reality and you get it right, it's more likely that hypothesis is true because of how hard it is to predict the future. That's why it matters. But yeah, so if you want to talk about like why can't a quantum field count as the transcendental truth of reality or something?
Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation to have, but it's already getting pretty late here,
All right.
and
Yeah,
I'm
it was
gonna
really
have to
great having
jump.
you on. It was a really fun chatting. So if you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work, go ahead.
Yeah, you could just check out my channel at Christocentric Philosophy. But I really love for us to continue this conversation some other time when I'm more
Absolutely.
prepared.
Absolutely. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Right, thank you.
You can close the screen whenever you're ready. Okay. There you go. What is up, guys? How is the chat doing today? That was a good conversation with the precept. He was not annoying like other precepts. He was not like a Darth Dawkins. He actually listened. He responded. He was a good precept. He was a really good precept. If anybody wants to head over to the Discord, do a Q&A, Discord. General. Put a link to the Discord and the YouTube thing. You can scan it, join the Discord, ask me questions, etc., whatever. I need to. Oh, I forgot to write my invoice for chess. I need to do that too. So if anyone wants to hop in general chat in the Discord, go for it. What's cooking? I need to cook pork. So I have like 6 different bags of pork marinating with different sauces because I wanted to try them out. So that's what I'm doing. That's what's cooking. Hello, Duke. Hello, Rakila. How is it going? You are server muted. Unserver muted, Rakila.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Yeah, as you said, I think it was a good debate.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hey.
Do you have anything else?
I mean, I haven't had that much experience with people in those positions, but as you said, it was. I like when it. Oh, I can hear myself echoing. What the hell is going on?
I cannot hear you echoing, so I think that's on your end.
Okay, I can hear
it's
my
because
own
you have the
voice.
YouTube channel open. You have the YouTube channel open.
Oh, yeah, that might be it. Oh, well, that's okay. I'm trying now. Okay, yeah. So my experience with those positions is not the same as I've heard before. So this, as you said, was a very good conversation, mild conversation. It was not a dumpster fire. It was not whatever. So I really enjoyed it.
Yes. I think we got to explore a lot more of the presupposition than normal. Because like Darth Dawkins, you don't really get to explore what he actually believes because he deflects a lot. And so I think this was a really great conversation to be able to really explore what precepts believe.
Yeah, I'm James Earl, by the way.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yep.
Anybody else got any questions? See a bunch of other guys here.
Yeah, I would just like to say, yeah, that was a great conversation, And I actually have a novel testable prediction. I predict that every time you encounter one of these presuppers, they always bring up the Romans 1 argument. And this guy did not fail. He tried to sneak that in.
Which one is that?
The argument that, well, you cannot deny that there is a God because everything around you clearly indicates that there is one.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the fundamental things of their position. So yeah.
And this, I did hear it in this conversation. It didn't happen at the start. It happened like about halfway through.
Yep. Well, I think it's fine for them to say that. I think that's because it is a part of their position. So I think they do have the burden of proof to try to explain why they think trees indicate God exists or whatever. So I think that's fine.
And so far, they've all failed. Great job.
Thank you.
I got a question. What books would you recommend for studying philosophy?
I have on the Discord, there is a section for suggested reading list. There's a whole bunch of them on there, but it's mostly the distinctions that are primary distinctions in philosophy, like the noumena phenomena distinction, a priori posteriori, synthetic analytic distinction, manifest for scientific image, those kinds of things. The distinctions in philosophy are probably the most constructive part of what philosophy has done. So I would suggest us learning a lot of the basic philosophy distinctions. Mostly papers, not books. Books are a lot of extra stuff you don't really need. So just read the papers or just wiki, essentially, the distinctions, and that's all you really need to know. But yeah, if you want to check the T-Jump suggested reading list area, it's got a list of a bunch of stuff.
Hey, T-Jump, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So theology may contain scientific facts, or it may contain like philosophy, but do you think that science supports the claims theology makes? Like,
Depends.
Okay.
Because it depends on which claims.
Like, we'll use the Abrahamic theology. Like, people say there's scientific facts in the Bible, but just because it talks about the earth doesn't mean that the scientific fact that the earth exists doesn't prove the claim that Yahweh created the earth.
Right. Just like in Harry Potter, there's King's Cross Station. Doesn't prove that Harry Potter and magic is real. So there are true facts like New York City is in Spider-Man, which are supported by science, but it doesn't mean that all of the facts of the book are correct simply because there are a few factual things in it.
So are theists are apologists just wasting time when they talk about scientific facts, when they talk about physics? They can be well learned in all these fields of science, but I would say they're wasting time because what they know doesn't support what they claim.
It depends on what you mean. Like, they're not wasting time in that they make money. They make lots of money. So, but like,
Yeah.
Are they wasting time from a scientific perspective that there's absolutely no value in what they're doing? Pretty much, yeah.
Well, they're wasting time. Are they wasting time if they're trying to prove their position, their theology? Because it's not proving it. They could say, look, this rock weighs 33 pounds, therefore my God exists. Like, that does not, talking about the rocks does not prove the God.
Well, so it kind of depends. Like, it's perfectly fine to use like a motivated reasoning in order to try to look through science, try to find facts. That's perfectly fine. So as long as they acknowledge the data that as it's discovered and agree with the data, that's totally okay. So like, if they do discoveries like looking for the Exodus and discover there's no evidence of the Exodus, and they admit that, sure, that's great. That's perfectly fine. If they try to obfuscate that or try to make it work when it doesn't, that's where it's a problem. That's where it's just a waste of time. You're just lying, essentially making stuff up to try and make it fit when it doesn't. And so if they just use it as a motivation to try to look for things, that's perfectly okay. If they try to use it to make the data fit their hypothesis, that's where it's mostly a waste of time.
Right. So I would say that theology, a person's theology can inspire them to do science. It can inspire them to do physics. It may inspire them to do philosophy, but it's not the other way around. Their discoveries never seem to support their theology. They're like, people will say, without the Catholic Church, we would not have science today. Well, that could be true, okay, but the science that we discovered does not then support the claims that their theology make, that like the claim that Yahweh is the God that created the universe.
Yeah. So there's a difference between like the origin of a thing really doesn't have anything to do with the like whether or not it's their position is true. So like monkeys are the origins of humans. Does that mean that the things monkeys believe are more likely to be true than the things humans believe? No. So the fact that a precursor ideology started the main ideology doesn't really make a difference to the truth of the precursor ideology.
Do you think it would be helpful to get theists to recognize this point, or do you think they already recognize it? Because they spend, I shouldn't say theists, I should say apologists. They spend a lot of time in the sciences, in certain fields that are knowledge based, but I don't know
the
if they
smart
realize.
ones do realize it, but it doesn't matter because their goal is to make the people who follow their religion not feel stupid. That's the goal. The goal is to say they can't, to try to make average people who believe in God not feel stupid for believing in God. That's what the point is. And so when apologists say those kinds of things, it's mostly just a rhetoric in order to make theists be able to feel more comfortable with the fact that they believe in God rather than rejecting like science or whatever. And so it doesn't matter if they know it. They're still going to say things like that because it makes their demographic feel good, even though it's not like really logically based.
Well, at this point in the discussion, I think oftentimes is brought up, why would you want to make a theist lose his belief? And they say, because God offers purpose, and without God, there is no purpose. So they poison the well by insinuating or claiming that without the belief, the people will just start ripping their clothes off and murdering everybody. I think that is part of the fear tactic or the claim that is made.
Yeah. A lot of theists, because they believe in God, think that good things are only possible through God, kind of a thing, which is clearly wrong. But because they believe so dogmatically in that, they think that if you don't have God, you're more likely to be evil and sin and all those things, which is just factually false. It just doesn't correspond with the evidence we have.
It would be nice to start to popularize those two fronts. One being that the science is not supporting the theological claims, and two, that there is purpose without theological underpinnings.
Yep. To do that, one of the goals of the atheist church I'm starting is to do exactly that.
That would be great. That would be great because, unless you're a theist and you're not being bothered by it, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. If somebody is comfortable, they just say, why would I want my life to, why do I need to change my beliefs? But for a lot of people, they have been, the comfort theism claims to provide isn't there.
Yep.
thank you for hearing me out.
Yep, no problem.
Good luck with your church.
Thanks.
And,
Need as much help as possible trying to get the
May someday you be just as rich and influential as the Catholic Church and do an even better job for the world.
will do. Thanks. Anybody else got any questions, comments?
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing all right with that Ricky Gervais video I made for you, huh?
Yep. It's very,
Doing all
very
right.
good. Need more. Need like 10 more of the same ones.
Would you not want to do something like that for your to promote the church, the charity?
What do you mean?
Well, you just started the GoFundMe. Did the 501c3 paperworks come through?
Oh, it takes like 8 months for that. So it's not yet.
Just all prep so far.
Yeah. So like you submit it
'Cause-
to the IRS and they take forever.
Yeah. In the meantime, I mean, it might benefit to make some videos just so that people understand that the GoFundMe exists and everything.
Yeah. But mostly it's like what I'm trying to get the tax exemption first, so it becomes like tax deductible donations. That's the goal because I need big donations.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me know if you need any help with the videos because that I can do.
For sure. Absolutely. Definitely. If you want to go for it. Right now, what I'm trying to do is just get the shorts. If I can get like a couple 20 million shorts going, that would be huge. Then once my YouTube is that big, it'll make it a lot easier to promote that kind of stuff.
Good planning. Yep.
But yeah, so my focus has been more on building my YouTube channel for now, rather than trying to build the church, because the church is easier once I have tax deductible stuff. Then it'll be easier to build the church.
Yeah, fair point. I don't think I have any other questions. The only thing I wanted to bring up was when we were talking before, it was the whole thing about design and how we tell what something is designed versus naturally occurring.
Yep.
You mentioned that if we see a spaceship fall to Earth, we would be able to tell that obviously we could see controls, remotes, whatnot in it. We could tell this thing is designed. Would it not be a little bit more, and this whole thing was in reference to the watchmaker analogy. My thing is, would it not be more accurate to say, or to ask the question, something falls to Earth. How do we tell whether it's designed or not?
As opposed to,
How do we tell if it's designed or naturally occurring? As opposed to saying a spaceship, which we are defining as designed, falls to Earth. Wouldn't it be more? Wouldn't it be a little bit more analogous to say something falls to Earth? How do we tell whether there's the hallmarks of design? How would we tell?
yeah. So I like to give examples of the tesseract. The tesseract, a four-dimensional object, four-dimensional square. If a tesseract falls to the Earth, how could we tell if it was designed or not designed?
That I'm unfamiliar with. What would the answer? How would you answer that?
Oh, well, that's the question for design proponents, because my answer for how we tell if something is designed is we use past examples and we say, what is the evidence that we've seen this thing designed? Do we have a designer that we've seen do it? And so we wouldn't be able to tell, like just seeing a tesseract, you won't be able to tell if it's designed or if it's a natural process. You have no idea. But the challenge is there for how would a apologists answer that question, because all of their examples are usually like a spaceship or a BMW or a plane, things we know that are designed because we know they're designed. So if you give them something that we don't know if it's designed, we don't have any previous examples for, how would they then try to argue that it's of their design variety? And they can't. That's the point. That's why I use something so strange like a tesseract, because they're going to say their classical arguments are, oh, it's complicated or not simple or blah, blah, blah. And that won't give you an answer for things like a tesseract or things like a natural process, because we haven't ever seen them before.
Yeah, you would have to reference it. I guess in this case, you said past examples.
Yep.
Yeah, see, that's what I initially put in that video that you were analyzing, and you said no, we don't need any more of a sample size other than one.
Yeah, for like if you're
A
the point of that
designed
argument.
universe.
Yeah, for that point of that argument, if you're trying to say that, like, you would require other examples to know whether something is designed or not designed. Well,
Right.
no, like if you have natural processes that can already account for the thing, then you don't need more than one example. Like if we see a rainbow, we don't need to think a rainbow is designed because we've seen one rainbow and how it's made.
Well,
Right, yeah.
presumably, designed things and undesigned things can fall, and the process of falling, gravity, would have to be investigated to if that was a designed, because you'd have to observe the object.
Well, no, so you'd have to come
inspect.
up with independent criterion for designed things. That would be the standard you would need first.
Yeah, but is the falling process, is that in question of like, if I picked up an object and dropped it, that's so the way it fell are we talking about that's the design in question?
Well, again,
Like
so
if I
the
picked
first
up
thing is you need a
a-
criterion. You say design things have this property. When we see this property, we can infer this thing is designed. So that you wouldn't just say anything is designed. You'd say this property has this similarity of what we're looking for to determine if something is designed. And then you would infer if this thing has this property, then we could start to see if it's designed. So if gravity had the whatever property you were thinking of, then maybe.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Before you said no, you don't need a reference. You can assume that based off of it's kind of how did you phrase
Natural
it? You don't.
processes.
Yeah.
So yes, if we
Well,
have other
the
examples that
action-
already exist in reality, then we can confer it's not designed if we've already seen it being done by natural processes. So you don't need other examples to confer not design, but you do for design.
Well, let's focus on the action of falling. Like we
Which
may
property
assume that
does the action of falling have that you would use to infer design?
the property in question would be gravity.
Well,
But I was going to give
Well, so again, to infer design, what you have to do, you have to say there is a property, there is something, and this some like complexity, organization, intentionality. You have to say some property and then say, does this object we're talking about have that property? So you have to identify a property that is endemic to design, and then say that the thing you're thinking about has that property. So what property does falling have that you think would be relative to intelligent design?
If gravity was designed or created to exist. So walking, for example, I would say that walking is designed, but gravity isn't. Like there's more evidence that a mind is responsible for walking than falling.
Okay, and what's the property? Like the
property of walking.
No. I'm not talking about walking. What property does walking have that you would infer design? So for anything that you want to infer design, you have to identify some kind of a property that is within designed things, and then say this thing walking has this property. Well, that's begging the question. That's the thing you're asking about. So like complexity is the one that theists use normally. Intentionality, things like purposefulness, irreducible complexity. Like people introduce properties that they think are only present in designed things. There is no such property. There's no property that anyone's ever discovered that is only present in designed things. It's just not a thing. But you need something like that in order to infer design from any random object.
Yeah, Wise Ape, this was more in response to the watchmaker analogy initially, so that's sort of what the framework of this was.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I had not that my thoughts were, anything. To my mind, I was like, oh, this might add something to the conversation, but I couldn't help myself.
This is going to be out there, but I don't think that people in general would care about purpose if somebody didn't ask the question of outside purpose. Like if we had no intuition purpose outside of humanity, then I don't think we'd be too worried about humans providing their own purpose.
I don't think that's how it works, because people like to level up, like video games, like to go to the next level. And so when we ask about purpose, there's the purpose that I give you. I say, your purpose is to do X, Y, and Z. And then somebody says, well, I want a bigger purpose than that. Where would you get that bigger purpose? And so I think that when the origin is of why they ask the question isn't just because they just asked a random question. It's biologically driven. It's biologically, we have this desire to have bigger and better things. And so I think that the reason that we are interested in the question in the first place is because of that need to go higher, need to add in more stuff, which is not just from asking the question, it's from biology.
Sure. So, sure. So, I would say that we might have a need or desire for outside higher purpose, but to say that we would probably be less disappointed if somebody didn't assert that there was a thing that happens not to exist to provide higher purpose.
Well, sure, I don't think you could get a higher purpose from imaginary beings, but I think most people believe that their God exists, which is why it gives them purpose.
Okay.
You guys got any questions, comments?
Not for me. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I'm trying to work on an ontology for existence itself. I'm trying to dismiss non-existence. It's a hard thing to do.
I think, therefore I am, therefore I don't not exist.
Yeah, but the that I'm fine with that. That's something I accept. That I would say that there's a whole bunch of properties in the eye, and that shows something fundamental about existence.
I don't know what you can know that it shows about existence.
Okay, so I experience.
Yep.
The experience is my thoughts.
Yep.
And I experience thoughts, and the memories are my saved experiences. And the collection of those thoughts would be the I, or the collection of all that would be the I.
I would probably disagree there, because I think your memories could be false. So the I wouldn't count as the memories. The I would just be the direct experience.
Okay. But I think the observation of the experience gives some indication of externality and dimensionality.
I don't know about that one. Like how?
Okay. Um, so the the thoughts have form, and the experience has form. And the observation of the thoughts and the experience is the I experiencing the I.
But all of that could just be a delusion. All of that could just be in your imagination, right?
The experience could be in my imagination, but the thoughts, let's say the experience is in my imagination, but
Well, like the form. You
form.
said they have a form. So could it be the case that reality is a bunch of ones and zeros on a like one-dimensional or two-dimensional like plane, like a PCB board or
Mhm.
something, and the form that you have is actually a construction from this 3D or from the computer program in your brain. So right, the form that you have, the form that you experience, isn't actually there.
Yes, that's great. Even if it was two-dimensional, it would still be relevant to information and form.
Well, the point is the form could be completely different than the form that you imagine it to have.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So I can't assert existence. I can only observe it.
But you can assert existence, like that's that part you can assert, but you can't assert what existence's form is, what makes up existence. You could just say, "I exist," whatever that is.
Okay.
You can go with like an inductive analysis or say, I think therefore I am, I exist. In my experience, there's some difference between my imagination and the things I experience. Like I imagine a unicorn, but I don't see a unicorn. And there's some difference between these two things. And from the difference, I can try to like make a methodology to tell the difference between the two. And like which I can use science for. And science can tell me that object X is one of the experiential things and not one of the imaginary things or non-experiential things. And then from that, you can start to derive certain things about reality or try to make inferences. They could be wrong, but you can at least have some justification to believe that there's some difference between your imagination and reality and try to go from there into the external world.
Yeah. I'm going to mute myself because I ran out of ideas.
All right. Anybody else got anything? Any questions, comments, ideas to fund the church?
Yeah, so epistemology is really when where the presuppositions get their ideas from. Basically, that the only way we can do anything is if we get our knowledge from some sort of deity.
Yeah.
Or creator, correct?
Yeah, that's their epistemic source of knowledge. They think it requires a deity in order to gain an epistemic source of knowledge.
Right, and they also don't believe in like Cartesian certainty. They believe in like absolutes. Is that
what
correct? Or
what do you mean? I think they do believe in Cartesian certainty.
They do?
I think so. What do you mean by Cartesian certainty?
Like, do they believe that knowledge has to be absolute in order to be valid?
Yes.
Or
yes,
they do? Okay.
Yes. They'll say they won't. They'll try to say that, oh, you don't need certainty for knowledge, but they'll come back at some point to another end of the argument and say, oh, well, that can be doubted, usually because of the problem of induction. Therefore, it's not knowledge. And so underline their methodology, they do typically have some kind of implicit assumption that knowledge requires certainty, which is called infallibilism.
And they kind of use that as kind of like a battling ram against any other worldview, and suggest that they don't have a foundation for their epistemology, therefore it's invalid.
Yes, or has contradictions or inconsistencies or something. Yeah, they'll say that if you can't answer all the different problems of philosophy, like the problem of induction, then your worldview doesn't provide knowledge. Therefore, mine wins, or something along those lines.
But that's despite the fact that their own worldview requires like assumptions as well.
Yes. So more importantly, their own worldview also can't solve the same problems in philosophy, like problem of induction, problem of the uniformity of nature, problem of the one and the many, problem of universals. Like theirs can't solve these problems either. The ones they're going to accuse your worldview of not being able to solve. And so you can just reflect the thing back on them. Well, yours can't. How does yours solve this problem? And they're going to assert some gibberish because they think it solves it, but it doesn't. And you can just essentially mirror it back and say, well, mine does the same thing, but without the consciousness.
Yeah, because one of the arguments I come across with precepts is like you can't tell whether or not if the future will be like the past.
Yeah, induction, problem induction.
Yeah, and they say like you're begging the question by assuming like the future will be like the past, but whereas with their own worldview, they're also making assumptions as well.
Yeah,
because they have to believe in like first they have to believe in some sort of deity that has the ability to make it happen. And
well, their objection there is the circularity. So if you're using the future and past to justify your beliefs about the future and past, it's circular reasoning. And so the circular reasoning they're going to say is not a justification for belief. And so when they do that, you just say, okay, well, you're also using circular reasoning. You believe in God because the Bible told you so, and you think the Bible is true because God wrote it. So you reflect that back on them, that their circular reasoning, they're using the same thing. And then you can just show comparatively that yours is less bad.
I see. So would my worldview be better because it makes less assumptions? Like, for example, I only have to believe that the laws of physics are self-sustained and are unchanging.
I guess the number of assumptions is one criterion you could use, but I don't like that. I like having an epistemic measure that is better at differentiating imagination from reality. I think is the better criterion to go with than just saying minus less assumptions. So like, I really don't care about the number of assumptions your worldview has. Let's say you have 1 billion assumptions, but with those assumptions, you're better able to predict the future. Then I think you have a better justification, even though you have more assumptions. So I don't really care about the number of assumptions. I care about what you can do with those assumptions that shows that it's different in some meaningful way.
Makes sense.
Anybody else got any questions, comments?
I do.
Sure.
I have another one.
Sure.
So precepts will say, hey, I presuppose something, but you're presupposing the laws of logic. Should we then point out that using the laws of logic hasn't produced like false results? That may not be a true statement. Like there may be an example somewhere where if you use the laws of logic and maybe I don't make a novel testable prediction, my prediction doesn't come true. But I do think in general that the laws of logic are accurate. However, and they could say that's circular reasoning, right? But that special pleading for the laws of logic being circular reasoning may be like the only special case where circular reasoning works. However, circular reasoning in other fields, like the Bible's true because the Bible says so, or some other example, have proven to be false. So my question more or less is, how do you push back against a presup who says that their presupposition is just as valid as presupposing the laws of logic?
Well, I don't presuppose the laws of logic, so I prefer not going that route. I would say that your best option would probably be to say that presupposing the laws of logic doesn't entail any more ontological commitments than presupposing a God. So, like, presupposing the laws of logic nothing exists. You're not saying it takes a potato or something. Whereas presupposing a God entails a whole bunch of properties: omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omniscience, non-physical mind outside of space-time, and all of those things would be less parsimonious, less simple than assuming just the laws of logic. So, if you're trying to make some kind of just conceptual analysis, you can go with simplicity at that point, which one entails less assumptions, essentially. But I don't really like going that route. It's not really my favorite.
Yeah, it's not my favorite either, because just to say we have to pick the simplest thing as the best explanation isn't necessarily valid.
Yeah.
It may take a potato, it may take a pineapple, it may take a God, but where, like you asked the previous caller, where's he getting this theology from? And he sort of dodged it. It had to have been from the source, like a biblical source, unless he's claiming his revelation, he never read or was educated on the Bible, and it was like
well, he admitted it.
just
He said that, yeah, he does get it from the Bible. So he admitted that.
Yeah, so it just seems like they presuppose. I understand what may convince somebody to presuppose something is true. It's based on feelings. They, like, one example might be they ask themselves, is this true? And the idea or the answer emerged in their brain, yes, it's true. And they didn't know how to parsimoniously like justify their answers that they think. Like, the mind seemed to answers in the mind just seem to appear, but then
what was it? What were you saying?
That's where
Something
you have
about reasons to presuppose something?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what are good reasons to presuppose something, and I'm trying to talk on the nature people have to accepting a presupposition. Like, use Mormonism for example. The one tactic is they'll ask potential converts to go home and pray or think about if Joseph Smith is true or the Book of Mormon is true. And I think if I was to be asked that question, yes, like the thought yes might pop up in my head, and then I may just accept that because I don't have any education on like when to accept some thought into my head as like a valid answer. I think we all think crazy things sometimes, and it's like,
for sure.
Like one time, a pastor asked me to think of Jesus walking down the beach with you, and my imagination produced a scenario where, like, a representation of Jesus was walking down the beach, and for a while I thought, oh, that means Jesus is true. But a few days later, I thought to myself, try to imagine a dinosaur, existing right now, and and my imagination produced like images of dinosaurs, and it's just kind of made me think that was
I don't think
bad.
there's any reason you should presuppose anything. I don't like any presuppositions. My worldview doesn't have any presuppositions.
Well, the presup often says, well, you're presupposing logic, or
I'm not. I don't presuppose logic in my worldview.
so how could you defend that?
Mine
they say,
starts
well, you
with,
can.
I think, therefore I am. And what they're going to say is that the sentence, I think, therefore I am, is an argument, and the argument presupposes logic, but it's not. In my case, it's just a descriptive statement. It's like saying the sky is blue. I think, therefore I am is an experience. I'm having an experience that I'm thinking. In my experience, it doesn't presuppose anything. I'm not like presupposing things to have an experience. I'm literally just having the experience. So there are no presuppositions when you have an experience. The presuppositions come in when you try to explain the experience. And since I'm not doing that, I'm just
Right.
saying I have an experience. My worldview doesn't have any presuppositions. Like, here is the experience.
Yes, I see. And you spoke to that already. Like, just because I experience having a body, it doesn't make the body true.
Right. It could be in the matrix.
Right. And I guess I would have to sit with that to be able to get really comfortable explaining that idea, because sometimes I think it can just get lost for some individuals. Like,
Yep.
not saying you get lost with it, but I think a lot of people are confused on that. Especially the precept. They say, "Oh no, you're presupposing this," but to be able to really understand how you don't have a presupposition is a really good thing to be able to. Yeah.
I would
Thank you.
say it's true, but I couldn't prove it with myself.
You are breaking up
Me
quite a
and
bit,
you are
roboting quite a bit. If you can fix your mic and come back and let me know what you were saying.
It's hard sometimes being in the position I'm in, because there are a lot of educated people out there, and a lot of times theists are very educated, and I'm constantly told I don't make any sense. It's like gaslighting almost, it's like being told that you just you can't see it.
Well, I don't know if that's gaslighting, because like, it's genuinely the case that some people probably can't understand you or know what you're saying sometimes. Like, that's true of me many times. So I think, like, the challenge is to learn how to communicate better, so that if the vast majority of people listening to you can understand what you're saying, then it would pretty much be disingenuous for someone to say they don't understand you.
Yeah, I get that. That's a good point. Because the things I utter, or anybody utters, it's doesn't entail that it's going to be coherent and understandable.
Yep.
I put it in the chat.
Oh, I can hear you now. What were you saying? I can hear you now, the guy who put the thing in the chat. What are you saying? What were you saying? I'm in a video
Yeah,
game. I
you
cannot look at
can
the
hear
chat.
me, but I'm in a bad spot right now, so that's why I'm not talking.
Oh, gotcha. All right. No problem. Can somebody check the chat and see what it says? Because I am not looking at the correct screen.
I said I would say about the stuff. I would say it is true. with my experience and the evidence of my experience, and us sharing the experience together to confirm that experience. But we could also be all having the same hallucination of reality. But I would say there is evidence for it, which is enough for me to say it's true, even if I couldn't be 100% right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, our collective experience would count as a justification for you believing it was true, even if it wasn't 100% for sure.
Could you explain on that where you say evidence, this is evidence that we gathered for a specific proposition or claim, but it doesn't. So explain the difference between that and the evidence actually supports the hypothesis or claim. Like when the guy sacrifices a virgin and he predicts that the sun will rise, you say that is evidence for, like, almost like it was gathered for that hypothesis, but it doesn't necessarily support.
Oh, that
Like,
would support it. So
maybe-
the difference here is post hoc versus novel. So evidence is if you can predict the future of something new that we don't know yet, and you get it right, that's evidence for anything. Even if you're like trying to make evidence of a god and you predict the future, then that's still evidence of a god if you can accurately predict the future in a way that we didn't expect. What would be trying to make the evidence fit is called post hoc rationalization, which is if we have the evidence already and you just try to see if you can make the evidence fit your hypothesis. So say that we have the evidence of fossils from all over the geological timescale, and creationists want to say, how can we make this fit into our hypothesis and not be a contradiction? Well, we can say God placed them there or something. And so that's taking the evidence we already have and making it fit your hypothesis. That's post hoc reasoning. But if you can predict the fossils, so like if you were a creationist and you said, I predict that there's going to be fossils of dinosaur bones because God did it, and then you, before we knew this, and you actually discovered it was correct, that would be evidence, even if you were trying to doctor it to try and make it like seem like to try and make your hypothesis seem true. So the difference there is being able to predict new things that we don't know yet and getting it right versus making old information fit. Anybody can make old information fit. Only the most rational hypotheses or most justified hypotheses can predict future information that we don't know yet and get it right. Novel future information.
well, how do you distinguish things that happen regularly and with, consistency, like the sun rising, when they say, well, no, that's a new prediction because the sun hasn't risen tomorrow yet. So if whatever hypothesis I come up with, like leprechaun, a leprechaun will cause the sun to rise tomorrow.
Well,
How do you distinguish that isn't a novel prediction?
Well, so if we predict the sun, if we've never seen the sun rise before, ever, and somebody predicts the sun's going to rise tomorrow, that's novel. It's new because we've never seen it before, right? But if we've seen the sun rise a million times, predicting the sun's going to rise tomorrow isn't novel anymore. We've already seen it happen. And so if you predict the sun will rise tomorrow and be blue, that would be a novel prediction. So novel is predicting things we haven't seen before, something that we don't already expect. Whereas if it's just a prediction, it's predicting things we've already seen, like the sun will rise or that people commit murder or whatever. And so novel is predicting something that has not been seen before.
So it's disingenuous to say it's a new day. That counts as a novel thing because we've already defined days. We know what a day is. So just because it happens again, anew, doesn't make it novel.
Right. So like I can say, I've made a prediction about other dogs, but not this dog. So it's a novel prediction. Like, no, it's the same as all the other dogs. And the way that you can differentiate that is can everybody make the prediction based off of the information we already have? So like if I wanted to predict, can everybody write into their theory, I predict the sun will rise tomorrow? Yes, everybody can do it. Anybody can predict the sun will rise tomorrow. And that's
so
how you
differ. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's how you tell if it's a novel prediction or not. Novel predictions are hard. They're not easy to like predict. Predicting the things that we already know is easy. Anybody can do it.
So how do you differentiate between evidence that is for a hypothesis, but the evidence doesn't conclusively prove the hypothesis correct?
Well, no evidence
Like
ever
somebody-
conclusively proves a hypothesis correct. It's not even possible. So like this is in science, this is called the problem of underdetermination. There's always infinitely many hypotheses that can all predict the data.
Okay, and that the theory is just a bunch of us that think that it is supporting the hypothesis the best. It's like a fact that is, you know,
well,
if new
the one
evidence
that's the best is the one that can predict the
is-
future the most, and there's only one of those.
and that's the theory.
Yeah, that's the one we come up
if
with.
we were,
That's evolution. Yeah.
yeah.
So like only one
Okay,
theory is
so we
come up
could
with
say-
first, and then the first one that somebody comes up with that can predict the future is the only one that can do it that we know of.
So creationists could say, well, I have all this evidence, but the scientists would say, yes, you have evidence for your hypothesis, but it's not the best hypothesis.
What? How do they have evidence? Like, I don't think they have any novel prediction.
Oh, okay. I was just going to consider that, like, the Earth existing as like evidence for, like, they'll smuggle in the term creation. They'll say creation, the Earth.
Well, so that's the
proves
thing I was mentioning earlier. Like anybody can, if anybody can predict something, because we already know it, like stuff exists. That's not a novel prediction. That's not evidence at all. For it to be evidence, what you need is to predict something new that we don't expect yet. So predicting that stuff exists is just post hoc. You're taking things we already know and making it fit your data, which is not evidence. Evidence is taking something we don't know yet and predicting it and getting it right. That's evidence. And creationists don't have any of those.
Well, I believe that you said the Earth or the sun rising tomorrow would be evidence for the hypothesis that if you kill a virgin, it'll cause the sun to rise.
We've never seen it before.
Okay, so that isn't really evidence though, because it is something that's not novel.
Right. So if I predicted that I'm going to, like, I don't know, scratch my nose and the sun will rise tomorrow, that's not a novel prediction. That's post hoc. You're taking things we already expect and predicting it into your hypothesis. So for it to be novel, we have to predict something we don't already expect.
So in court, let's change the example. Let's say it's a murder trial, and they're trying to determine if Tom killed somebody. And the evidence that they bring in, let's say, is a gun and some blood. They say that. When is it determined that that is evidence that Tom committed the murder?
Well, if we already have evidence of people using guns, then there's already empirical evidence of that happening. If we've never seen a gun before, then you would never be able to show that guns were evidence until you actually first tested the gun, figured out how it worked, and then you need to use other lines of evidence that we already had, like, so say we've already seen eyewitness testimony work or something, but we need to use examples of things we already have in the past. If you just have, so say use a wand. If someone used a wand and used Avada Kedavra to kill someone, you would not be able to show that in a courtroom. It would be thrown out of a courtroom. Even if it actually happened, it would be thrown out of a courtroom because there's no precedence for people using wands. We don't know how they work. We don't have any evidence that they can work. And so it's just not evidence until we can empirically demonstrate how wands work outside of the court case. Then it could be evidence.
So are things, like, let's say I have a wand, a gun, and some blood. Do I just call those things and not evidence? Because unless it points to, how would you say it, like a conclusion that supports the hypothesis.
Sure, if you
So-
wanted to be super technical, you could say that it's not really evidence until you have some way to increase the probability that it's true or whatever. You can call it
Yeah, so there-
facts. They're just facts, pieces of data.
So there's
Aliens
these hotline
landing on-
billboards. The hotline billboards say, call in, we have evidence for God. And that's what they tell you. They say, well, there's creation. So that's the evidence for a creator. But those are
You
just,
you can just say that's not how evidence works.
Well, a prediction would be like aliens landing on the White House lawn tomorrow, and they actually do be evidence for
Yep.
something.
That would be evidence. If you could predict it, if you knew it happened, we could predict it, that would be great evidence.
Well, I'm just gonna, so it has to, I would say it has to be specific too, right? Because,
Yes, has
If-
to be specific.
yeah, because
If
Eventually-
Jesus came through the clouds of the earth and the whole earth somehow saw Jesus somehow through some kind of illusion, then that would be evidence. But that hasn't happened.
well, see, aliens are more like probable because we understand that they may arrive or manifest through natural processes. Where if Jesus was the claim that he'll appear on the White House lawn, that's something we don't really understand to be a natural process.
Well, so aliens are more plausible because the ontology of their makeup is something we
Yep.
already know to exist. Yes. So it's be more ridiculous to claim Jesus than to claim aliens.
But I would say that just predicting the aliens will land without a time reference is not a very good prediction because given enough time, that is something that could naturally occur.
Well, it's more than one. So, like, if I make a prediction that entails many different possibilities, then that's the same as making many different predictions. So, like, if I predict that there will be a woman president in the future,
Yeah.
that's the same as me predicting there will be a woman president in 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, and each one is wrong except the one that happens to be right. But because it's ambiguous, you don't really realize that. So yes, for predictions to be real evidence, they have to be precise. You have to make a precise prediction because if you don't, then it's the exact same as making multiple predictions.
Right. Just like rolling the dice and saying I'm gonna roll a 12. And then you only show the time that it rolls a 12. You could be perceived to be correct, but if it wasn't like I'm going to roll a 12 and you roll it the first time, that isn't a novel testable prediction because like 12 getting a 12 has been something that was that we already know is possible or happens.
Sure.
I mean, it's irrelevant to the point, but I was going to say that some people could roll a 12 if they fix their rolls.
Yes. So you can cheat to get your predictions correct as well. That is true. People do that. Faith healers, people who like tricksters and liars. So yes, you can make testable predictions that you know are going to come true because you've made them come true. Also not evidence that you're right. But it can convince people, like Columbus did that. Columbus said...
The Bible does that.
I don't think so.
Well, the Bible wrote things in to say, and this happened because of prophecy.
That's not quite the same. So, like Columbus predicted that the moon, he was talking to the American Indians and said, if you don't give us food, our God will be very angry. And in exactly 1 week's time, he will block out the sun. It'll be completely black. And because he knew more about astronomy, he knew that there was going to be an eclipse at that time. And so he predicted that the eclipse would happen, and the Native Americans had no idea. They didn't know enough about it. So from their perspective, that's a novel testable prediction. In 2 weeks, will the sun be blocked out by this guy's God or whatever? And it happened. And because it happened, they were justified in believing that he actually did have some kind of access to some God they didn't know about that was greater than theirs, because his prediction was correct. But he obviously rigged the system because he knew about astronomy and used that to lie, which was not nice. But yeah, that's a novel testable prediction where he rigged the system and convinced a lot of people that he was right.
Well, yeah, all he had to do was have knowledge and then lie.
Yep.
But like the Bible example would be like, let's say there was a prophecy that
Well, those aren't novel
Messiah would
predictions, because like to be a novel prediction, it can't just be in its own document. So like if I said I made a novel prediction of the lottery numbers and I literally just looked back at the lottery numbers and just wrote them down on a sheet of paper, there's no way you can show that I didn't just write them down after the fact. So that's not evidence.
Right. It's just, I was just pointing it out as an example of why prophecy in the Bible isn't really a prediction.
Well, the problem with prophecy in the Bible is it's too vague. It's the thing you said earlier, that if you just say there's going to be a woman president, that's exactly the same as predicting there's going to be one every year and being wrong every year. So that's the problem with prophecies in the Bible, is that they're just wrong. But it does make prophecies about the future. A lot of them, like the Revelations, where you go when you die. So there are novel predictions in the Bible.
So what is somebody doing when you explain that to them and they go, oh, okay, yeah, but then they just like kind of obfuscate or don't even acknowledge that, why that doesn't count as a prophecy. They just seem to accept it, but then they still keep that belief that it's a prophecy.
People don't
usually
just change
stubbornness?
their minds. Yeah, you just, the goal is to convince the audience, not the person you're debating against.
Well, if the prophecy contains something faulty in it, you could point that out too. You could say that, well, in Revelations it said that Jesus would come 1,000 years ago, and he didn't, and he hasn't ruled the earth for 1,000 years either, which would have been a failed prediction.
Yeah, there are a number of failed predictions that you could account.
So what's going on when somebody says, I have all of this evidence for God, and you say, well, just give me your best one. And they do, and you prove to them that it's not considered evidence, and then they just like, okay, well, what about this one? What about this one? It's
That's
just
perfectly
that
fine.
it's just fine in a way that people are free to believe whatever they want.
No, that's just how you go through evidence. Like, disproving their best one doesn't mean that they should stop believing immediately.
Well, it's when you disprove it, but they still believe it.
That's what I said. So it's totally fine. Like if I said 20 pieces of evidence and you disprove my best one, that doesn't mean the other ones are wrong. So it's perfectly fine to believe different sources of evidence.
I think when you disprove one source of evidence, they still believe that one source of evidence is evidence.
Yeah,
it's not that
typical. That's fine.
Yeah,
they can check their own sources and not believe your information. That's fine. Oh my God. Oh wow.
Hey, T-Jump.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long ago you read the Bhagavad Gita, but you said something a while back that they predicted like 4.6 billion or 4.3 billion.
Yep.
Like a month ago, I read that book and it said like 2 point something billion instead.
The total number is 4.3 billion, but they say we're only halfway through a sleep cycle, so it would only be 2.4 billion by the actual number of where we are, but the total number is 4.3 billion.
Okay.
So the total the total waking or sleeping cycle of Brahman is 4.3 billion. They believe we're only halfway through one of the sleeping cycles, so the current time is only like 2 billion. But the actual number is 4.3 billion for the total, which is almost correct.
Yeah, that's. I guess if I was going to be religious, that would be the only one that I could consider.
It's the closest one.
Yeah. I didn't like the Bhagavad Gita though. And I know that's not an argument, but I just didn't like the concept that you'd have to worship Krishna in order to be with Krishna, etc. And then he admitted to like hell planets, stuff like that, and I was like, that's bizarre.
I mean, I think it's just as bizarre as all the other silly religions.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
Anybody else got any questions, comments, anything else going on? Ways for me to make money for my church would be great. I need $4 million.
Are you planning on having a building?
Yep. Well, the first thing I want to buy is an apartment building. Then we can use that to fund to buy an actual church facility.
Okay. What state are you going to start with? Like Austin, Texas,
Minnesota.
or?
Probably Minnesota because I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Out of curiosity, how do you go about finding the people who you interact with? Do they come to you? Do you find them?
Both
How does that work?
emails. So just go to Google, Facebook, Twitter, any social media. See people with the correct topics, and then just invite them to come on your show. That's about it. Right now, I have mostly. Oh, David. I have people inviting them for me for the most part. There's some that I've invited myself, but mostly I've been focusing more on shorts recently.
I think Darth Dawkins is very rude.
And the sky is blue.
How do we bet?
No, you can't say it's blue because you gotta reference God. Not.
How do we best combat tribalism, where peer pressure is used to adopt the beliefs of the in-group? I know America has a freedom from religion, but let's say you are an American and you're the surrounding culture purports to be Christian. I feel like what is the best way to combat that in-group, out-group tribalism that that pressures people to adopt a belief that has been falsified to be true.
Well, tribalism is an inherent part of human biology. And so combating it is like trying to combat evolution. It's going to take either brain changes, AI, computer chips. So you're not going to be able to combat that. The best thing to do is just to use tribalism and create another tribe that's better and gets people to adhere to it. So that's like the atheist church kind of a thing. Like you're not going to be able to like stop tribalism, just like you're not going to be able to stop belief in authority or whatever. What you need to do is just make your own tribe or join the atheist church and then make the world a better place. And if our tribe is better than the other tribes, then the tribalism will work in our favor instead of against us.
So you got to fight tribalism with tribalism.
Yep.
Which is, I would say that would be perfectly moral. It's not like.
Well, tribalism isn't a bad thing inherently.
Right.
It's like it's only bad if you do immoral things based off of it.
Or it's bad if you are being targeted because you something about you makes you an outcast from the tribe. Then it can adversely affect things that aren't in the tribe. So then I guess we'd have to discuss what wins the hearts and minds of the community. So like what gave the existing tribe such power to begin with? Let's say it's a Christian tribe, and there's an individual that rejects Christianity. I think you answered it by saying, you do the things like the Christians did by like forming a church and forming community around.
Yep, it's about the social phenomenon, the cultural relevancy, the people, the community who help. There's a lot of things that churches do that benefit people's lives. Lots of things that religions do that benefits people's lives. We just need to do that better.
See, it's lots of things that people do that the religions are taking credit for it now. They've infiltrated what people do.
Religions specifically cause both good and bad. So we know religions cause bad. Clearly, like you don't normally crash planes into buildings unless your religious text tells you to. Like you don't throw gay people off rooftops unless your religious text tells you to. Religions have an impact negatively, clearly, but they also have an impact positively. Like they can inspire you to do good things that you otherwise wouldn't do. And one of the things they do is like church organizations, tithing, those kinds of things. This like obligation to go to social events and build social connections that you otherwise probably wouldn't without some kind of motivation by church doctrine. And so having something like that builds community deliberately is super, super important.
Well, I would argue that people do that. Like people form families, they have sex, and they have children. And then religion comes in and they give you a marriage license, and then people assume that I know, but
marriage license comes from government, not churches. But so religion specifically inspires these kinds of like church gatherings more than any other organization. Like what other ideology do you think gets people together as much as churches do every Sunday?
Well, I'd argue that people do it naturally in some
Name another organization in the world where people get together as often and as much as churches.
About schools, like education.
But the religion is building on what people naturally do. Like a family, pre-modern society would seek out shelter and seek to build things.
So
now the religion,
in secular societies in Norway, Denmark, Japan, Sweden, do they have a location that brings people together as much as churches do?
No.
Right. Why?
Well, I think, yeah, religion does serve as a catalyst to build upon what is already being done naturally. Like it may,
so it makes it, you makes them do more things.
and enhances it.
Right.
Yeah. It
So,
could,
like, obviously, I don't think there's
it's
a religion that's ever done something that humans have never done before in the history of humanity. Probably not, but maybe like circumcision. I don't know, maybe, but that part doesn't matter. What matters is does the religion cause more of the good behaviors that benefit society? The answer is yes. Clearly, yes.
So what is religion? Because naturally stories do that too. Like you could tell a story and it could direct people's behaviors. So that's religion is just basically yeah.
So I don't know what exactly. So like religion is extremely useful. It's very, very good at bringing people together and building successful societies. And so we should utilize that, not try to reject it and deny our religion. Religion is very good. So, very, very good for lots of things.
So maybe religion carries baggage. So why not just call it a story? Just like
because it doesn't carry any baggage. It's just no one cares about a story. People care about religion. They don't care about stories. So why not just call it a religion and just not have the silly God? Keep the religion, get rid of the God.
Well, a lot of religious people don't accept other religions. So if you could popularize stories,
forget stories. That's not going to happen. Religion is great. Religion does an amazing thing, and we can have a religion and just reject all other religions, just like everybody else does. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with rejecting other religions. Like we reject all the religions. Why not just keep one and keep the good stuff and get rid of all the bad stuff?
Because religion entails the certain.
No, it doesn't. What does it entail?
So the one thing that bothers me about religion is the never admitting that it's a story.
That doesn't entailed in religion. Religions don't require that.
I think they do. I think that the only thing that differentiates a religion from a story is that the adherents never admit it's a story. As far as
you can have a religion based off of science. You can have a religion based off anything. A religion is just like a shared system of beliefs. Like you don't have to have a religion based off of a fairy tale. It doesn't have to be a story.
Also, let's not forget that everyone that believes in a religion does not believe in the same thing. I mean, there are plenty of Christians out there who don't believe there was a flood or that Adam and Eve were real or things like that. So you can still have your religion and your story at the same time. It just depends on who you're referring to.
Well, he's saying that religion requires a story, and I'm saying no, it doesn't. You don't need a story at all.
I thought you said religion was a story.
The current religions are. You don't need it, though. So there's nothing in religion that requires you have a story.
So religion could be defined as just ritual or...
no, you can keep religion the exact same. Religion is the exact same definition. No problem. There are many religions with no gods. There are many religions without any spirituality. You have a religion of science if you want. Make it just religion is just a way to socially connect, essentially. But if you just keep the definition exactly the same, don't change it one bit, just make the religion and get rid of all the silly parts of the story.
What is the definition of a religion?
I'm going to Google it. My mouse isn't plugged in. I know the government definition is just a organized practice of some kind.
Okay. Like a coalition of people.
Practical system of
Like
faith
the
or
ti-
worship, pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance.
Supreme importance.
Yeah, so like humanity, making people's lives better, science.
Yep. Yep. So the Abrahamic religion warns not to make anything of supreme importance above their God.
Yeah.
So
just make a different one with a better, non-ridiculous system of importance.
I'm going to have to get religious about things in my life.
Exactly. Join the atheist church. Make the world a better place.
I will, but I still think that term holds baggage. The religion, though, because
yes, it does, and that's a good thing. Like, the term queer, the term gay, those held baggage for the LGBT community. They were used as like derogatory terms, right? But then they turned those terms into terms of endearment within their community. And the same thing applies here. Like, yes, they do have baggage, but in order to get rid of that baggage, we need to like adopt it and make it something better, not just hide the word under the rug and never use it. Take ownership of the word and make it better.
Well, what would your pushback be against somebody who wants to say the universe is God? I've heard people say,
sure.
Well, why call it God? Why not just call it the universe? And I've heard the argument made that, well,
that's
because
called
God
pantheism. That's a real thing. Like, they're perfectly fine to do that. As long as you don't say that it's like conscious or whatever, then you can say that. You can be a pantheist if you want. There's nothing irrational or illogical about that.
I just want to parsimoniate, like when I use the term God, then that I'm not talking about the Abrahamic God. I don't want to support that usage. So I'm not quite sure how to make that distinction obvious to other people.
Say it. Say, by God, I don't mean the Abrahamic God. Just be sure to say it. So whenever you use a common word in a non-common way, you want to make sure that you add the definition after you use the word. So I think God, you see, so whenever you say God and you say, interrupt and say, by God, I mean the universe, not the Christian God. It's not conscious. God is the universe. That's what I mean by it. And so you can just correct them when they have the wrong impression of what you might mean by God.
So coming back to merchandise, we could make a T-shirt that says "I love God" and then parentheses, by God.
Oh no! You make it funny. Make it funny. So you'd say, "By God, I mean not the one that drowned babies."
All right. Guess we all need to become God-believing religious people.
Yes, God-believing atheists. Yes. But yeah, I think that we should start a church and we should do what American churches should be doing. So like, that's why I want to start the apartment building, because I want to be able to be like, churches should be providing low-income housing, affordable housing. And as atheists, our church does this. 100% of the atheist church provides affordable housing. Christian churches, like, none of them do it. And so our church is the more moral church, and that will really annoy the Christian churches quite substantially, enough to actually make them try to make a difference in the world. And so I think that should be one of our goals.
I am super religious, and by that I mean I'm an atheist. I don't know. I think there's going to be some confusion there for a while, but
you'd probably
we can work on it.
I am super religious. I'm in the Church of the Best Possible Worlds, which advocates for morality and not God. Because in mine, there's no God in mine. religions don't require a god. Like Jainism doesn't have a god, but it's a religion. Buddhism doesn't have a god, but it's a religion. Religions don't require a
'Cause
god.
I feel
So I just
I feel
don't
like
don't
we're
believe in
almost,
God. I don't believe in God. That's kind of, you can, but I don't.
but I feel like we're falling into the trap that when a theist says, "Oh yeah, atheism is your religion,"
Same
so
thing as I
maybe
said
the best
before. So like when
Mhm.
people use the term gay or queer, it used to be derogatory. And then the LGBTQ community took a hold of that and then made it a part of them. So we should just do the same thing. So yes, atheism is a religion and it's better than yours because we actually provide low income housing. We actually advocate for human rights. We actually don't have a deity that drowned babies. So instead of saying no, it's like just say, yeah, and ours is better
Perfect.
than yours.
Yeah. What about when they say, "Well, I have faith that Yahweh is God," like you have faith that He isn't?
No, I just lack evidence. So that's not, would not be the same. Like,
Yeah.
okay, what evidence do you have? Everything in our faith has evidence. What does yours have?
Well, see, I think a lot of people equate religion with faith,
Yeah,
which we could use faith
yeah,
just like we could use religion.
yep,
But
exactly. If we have a better usage that's more rational and makes more sense, it's going to have an advantage over their usage. But all right,
can
I'm
I
going to
actually
head
ask
off.
some?
I'm gotta go get ready and get some food. So thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Peace out.
Thank you.